Cheers, queers! Welcome to another episode of Big Gay Book Club. Today I'm going to be going over Girl Rules the novel. So, if you haven't watched the series or haven't read the novel, this will contain a bunch of spoilers. So if you don't want them, maybe don't listen to this now. Maybe go read it and then come back and listen to this. If you don't care, if you've read it and you want to know all the spoilers, we're going to get into that today. So the purpose of today's episode is to go over the novel mainly. I will do some comparisons with the series because there are some key differences, but mainly I'm going to be sticking with what the novel is about, what was going on in there, and my overall thoughts and feelings and opinions about it. So that's what we'll be going over today. All right. So I will say, if you want more Girls content, Kaitlynn and I together did watch the series, and then we did a bunch of breakdown episodes about the episodes as they were airing in real time, which was so much fun. So you can go check out that content on our YouTube or podcast platform if you want more content. If you're looking for the reaction videos specifically, those are on our Patreon mostly because GMMTV does not mess around when it comes to copyright. They're very strict. So getting episodes on YouTube is actually incredibly challenging. But we have a few over there if you want to check those out for free. So if you're interested in Patreon, the link is in the description. Check that out. Either way, it was really fun. Girl Rules was a ton of fun to watch, regardless of how you feel about it. And honestly, the novel was fun to read too, but for different reasons, and I will get into it. So overall, my experience reading this novel was weird because I had a hard time finding it. So I don't speak Thai. So I was looking for the English translation and I had a hard time finding it. So the app I normally use, I forget if it's Meeb or Meb, M-E-B. That's the app I mainly use to read Thai girl love novels that are translated into English. This book is not on there at all, which is weird. So I had to track it down, and I had to buy it off of Etsy, which was really weird and sketchy, and I hate that. If you know a legal way to buy this book so that GMMTV gets royalties for it for the English version, please let me know. I looked everywhere. I even looked on GMMTV's website at the time when I was searching for this. Maybe now that it's over, it's back on there. I'll have to check again to see if they're selling it, but I couldn't find it anywhere. So if you have a different avenue, please let me know, because buying it off of Etsy felt super sketchy. So if I'm wrong in any way, shape, or form about the content of the story based on the translation that I have, please tell me. That is absolutely a limitation to this review, is that I cannot fully trust the integrity of what I read because I got it off of Etsy. So please tell me if you know. I swear I tried. So why did I read it? I always like to start with how I read it, why I read it, and then what my first impression was of the novel. I read it because I really loved the series, and from my understanding, this series, Girls, was an original by GMMTV. There's a book similar to Clarabelle, where the whole point was the screen adaptation. That was the main focus, and so the novel is really goes with it. It's not like the first draft that then became the series, which is a little bit different. And so I wanted to know what the main proof of concept was of the story of Girl Rules before it fell into the hands of a bunch of screenwriters who then had to figure out how to adapt this to TV based on the budget of the TV series, the actors that were involved, all that kind of stuff, because that's going to influence your final product. So I was curious, where did this all start? And in Girl Rules, the novel, at least the translation that I read, it had this to say about the book itself. So it says, quote, "The Girl Rules novel is a companion novelization that was adapted directly from the original television screenplay. While GMMTV often adapts existing books for its series, Girl Rules was written as an original story for the screen first, with the book releasing alongside the show to complement it." And honestly, after reading it and watching the full series, I think that is the most accurate way to describe it, as a companion. So it's not that the book came first. This novel did not come first. This was adapted along, the screenplay came first, then this novel, then the final product of the screenplay. So it's meant to be a companion of because you get inner monologues of the characters, what they're thinking, that kind of stuff. So I've seen some comments on our Instagram in particular, people who clearly don't listen to this podcast but just found clips from the podcast arguing about the way the screenwriters were red flags and it had to do with the novel, and it's like, that's not that the screenplay came first that made the series. The novel was in addition. It's not the canon. So there is no canon. The canon is the show, which is interesting. But I thought companion is a good way to put it because there are different elements to this story. And to me, my overall feeling about Girl Rules the novel, it's really similar to the way I felt when I read and watched Harmony's Secret, in the sense that I felt like they were their own things. Like the show and the book were their own separate entities, even though in that scenario the novel came first, then the series. I felt that they were different enough that they're their own stories and they complement each other because there were different elements to the novel that were there that weren't in the screenplay, but the screenplay had different elements that complement the novel. So it's not that they were like completely independent stories that are not identifiable at all, like Us, the series, and Us, the novel. I felt that they complement each other. And that's kind of how I felt about this. So when I read that blurb, I was like, if you haven't read this novel and you're thinking about it, like that is what it is, which is very different than most Thai girl love adaptations, because again, they're coming directly from a novel. So that's it. And I will say my big the biggest thing I felt when I was reading it is that I hated Prim less in the beginning. I know, but don't worry, it changes. In the beginning, I was like, oh, wait, she is better. And then I kept reading it and was like, never mind. So, but I'll get into Prim. I will get into Prim because how could you not? All right. Other thing that was interesting about this novel is the because it's not a traditional novel. So the way it's written is there are chapters, but within the chapters, it's almost like broken down into scenes where it will kind of like end and there'll be like a line and then they go into another scene where you either like time jump with the same character or you switch to another character. So it reads a lot more like a television show because it's adapted from a television show screenplay. So that totally makes sense. So if you're somebody who likes shorter chapters, this is a good book for you. I like Kaitlynn's brain would honestly fit with this book because it's a lot shorter before it jumps to something else versus like 30 pages of like one thing kind of thing. Other thing about this novel is it's really short. It's like 140 something pages. It's less than 150 pages. It's like 146, 143. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it's way short. Your average novel is 300 pages. So it's really short, which makes sense because it's a screenplay. So they don't spend a lot of time like describing a ton of stuff. It's very like the concisely to the point to get into the character, to get into the dialogue, that kind of stuff. So it's a really quick read. I read it very quickly. Other thing is because it's a screenplay, they set up what you're about to read. It reads like a play a little bit in my mind. Like if you were in America and forced to read Shakespeare, even though you're not supposed to read it, you're supposed to watch it as a play. You're forced to read the screenplays. It kind of like sets up things like a screenplay where it tells you like the setting, who the characters are, what you're about to read, that kind of stuff before you even dive into it. So there's two sections I just want to read straight up from the book that really harp that. And that's the author's preface, where the author is telling you, this is what I intended with this novel, kind of thing. And then the editor's, the second one, where the editor kind of gives you a little bit too. So I'm going to give you the author's preface, which to me is like the thesis statement. So this is what it says. Relationships are complicated, but every complexity must have an end. It's a backdrop filled with sweat, ambition, tangled relationships, and hearts hiding more secrets than anyone can anticipate. This novel was born from a passion for telling the story of women who must fight in both work and love. Women who are strong yet still have a vulnerable side. Women who dare to love according to the voices of their own hearts. This novel is about love in its many forms, a relationship that challenges interpretation, and the behind the scenes world of fashion that is simultaneously luxurious, fierce, sensitive, and passionate. So essentially, what the author is saying is that the point of this is to show you strong, independent women living their lives and who are trying to find love, but it's not this one size fit all love that we're used to in storytelling where it's and then they lived happily ever at, like that kind of thing is not what we're doing here. We're showing you how many forms love and quote love can take. Okay. And then the editor expands on that a little bit more to make it more like clear what they mean by like the love piece. Okay. So the editor's note says, which is after what the author sets up, no one truly knows the definition of, quote, good enough love. The love that is said to make life beautiful, meaningful, and capable of moving forward with hope. When you fall and struggle, it is love itself that heals the wounds. But how much is, quote, good enough? How much is, quote, just right? Is simply having a lover by your side enough? Girl Rules, the main rule, don't love her, which is the full title, by the way, is about relationships called, quote, love that come in various forms and feelings. Everyone shares the same aspiration to find a love that is good enough. So essentially, what the author is saying is that in this story, we're going to explore people who are finding love that's right for them, not love that is perfect by some generalized statement. Meaning, we're not here finding people who are green flags and never have a red flag behavior. We're not finding perfect people because they don't exist. We're not finding what society would deem a perfect love because that also doesn't exist. We're finding love that fits the character. One that makes, one that's filled with hope, one that's good for them, it's what they need, that kind of thing. So again, they're setting up the stage for like what this is and how this story is going to be different than most stories that you've read. Also, the fucking title of the book is hilarious. Okay, then the author, then the editor does something really interesting where they're like, okay, here are the characters you're going to meet, and here's their perspectives on love. And you get this before you even jump into the story and meet any of these people. And I thought this was really interesting. And again, companion to the series, it puts you, it gives you a good perspective on who these characters are and why they behave the way they do, particularly when it comes to relationships. So we start first with Prim. For Prim, love is like a maze, which, yeah. Like, just think of Prim as a little mouse trapped in a maze. That's Prim. So essentially with Prim can't escape her ex, basically. She can't escape her feelings for Bambi. So it's like a maze that she's trapped in. And no matter how much she tries to find the exit to the maze, she cannot. She's just trapped. So not a great view on love. It's pretty negative if it feels like you're trapped, okay? So that explains Prim. Then we have Bambi. This one I thought was the most interesting. Bambi, love is like a mirror reflecting herself. And they explain it a little bit more. And basically what it means from the editor and author's point of view is that for Bambi, it's like a mirror in the sense that what you see on the outside, what everybody else sees doesn't match what's on the inside. So basically for Bambi, she will project one thing and then feel another, which is also Prim, but that's a whole nother story. So, and once we get further into like Prim and Bambi's story and like the reason they don't communicate and talk about real shit, it becomes very apparent that Bambi tries to make everything seem better than it is when it's not good, kind of thing. So it's like this like it's a dichotomous falsity that Bambi has going on. Bambi feels like this performance where she has to perform to make everything seem really, really good, even when it's not. So it's like this reflection where like outer world doesn't necessarily match inner world, which is so sad. So for Bambi, there's a disconnect. And then for Prim, there's a disconnect where like she wants to escape and can't. So I get, why do they end up together? They are the most toxic. Like, listen to this. They should not be together just based on this. Okay, then we'll get into Goria and Sasha. And when you read their headspaces, they make a lot more sense. So for Goria, love is infatuation, sensitivity, and wanting to be close. Okay, so love is all the feelings. And also, a good love should be reciprocated. Okay, that's what Goria thinks. Okay. So, and then Sasha says, love is about giving, not just receiving. So reciprocation. So these two, listening to their headspaces on love, they are on the actual same page. Bambi and Prim, not on the same page. Goria and Sasha, on the same page. Min and Prow. And Min and Prow, listen to Min and Prow. Min, love is the happiness of being oneself. So, which makes sense when you get through Min's arc of like discovering who she is and wanting to explore that. Makes sense, right? Prow. Love is being true to your own feelings. So Min and Prow, their love is all about being yourself unabashedly and the other person loving you. Gory and Sasha, love is about being on the same page and reciprocating the feelings and all of that. Prim and Bambi, being trapped in a maze and projecting what you don't feel. So when people are out here being like, oh, this show made it so much more toxic, I'm like, did it? Because this was the characters before you even get into it. I think it's after reading this, it's like honestly, like the characterization to me was all the same. It was just like they changed plot points. But like that's the setup, okay? All right. I was jumping ahead of myself. So before I get into this further and just kind of go into like the things that I thought were interesting, I just want to note some key differences from the series. And I won't like go through scene by scene and beat the dead horse with a stick, kind of metaphorically speaking. But main thing is that the main characters, so the characters I just mentioned, not this isn't I'm excluding every other character in the book because every other character is really different, but the main characters, okay? Prim, Bambi, Gloria, Sasha, Min, and Prow. They are the same. They are the same from the series in terms of characterization, like who they are, main character traits, their pros, their their green flag behavior, red flag behavior. That's all the same. What is different in the novel compared to the series is what is always different from a novel compared to a series is that you get the character's inner monologue, meaning when they're the point of view character, you get their thoughts when things are happening. Okay. And the thoughts of the characters, in my opinion, change how you view the characters because you hear what the character thinks about not only a situation, but themselves. So remember that. You're getting their point of view on stuff. And it does change what you think, mostly Prim, when you hear what she thinks about stuff and herself. But then when you look at the actions of the characters, you realize they're the same character from the series. So, again, the screenwriters did not change Prim's character. They did not. Prim is the same. It's just you get her thoughts and then you become more empathetic and then listen to her behavior and you're like, this is the same Prim. Okay. Main thing that's also different is like, okay, so the main characters, they're essentially the framework of the character, like meaning the characterization, the same. You just get their thoughts, which does change things a little bit, can change your perception, make you more empathetic perhaps towards them. Main thing that's different is like the events, settings, and sometimes the other characters revolving around them are either there, not there, or different in terms of characterization. So the main differences from the series, in my opinion, well, not my opinion, in actuality are there's no bi-porn crystal. So we don't even know anything about Prim's family. Prim's family never comes up. So that was a main difference, making Prim this eldest child with the weight of the world. Her dad left her. That was all in the series. My Porn Crystal, I imagine, was a fan service thing that GMMTV threw in there because they could. And I think that was a fan service thing to just throw them in there to get people excited about the show and pull all of their fans, people who are just like literally there for actors, not there for the actual art, to come watch it, which makes sense because a lot of the fan behavior is unfortunately that trend. So like you can't blame GMMTV for being like, well, throw all of the character or all the actors in there that fans will just follow because the actor's there. And honestly, I thought they were a fun addition, so I'm not mad at it. Another thing that's different is that every character's mother-daughter relationship is very different. It's either completely different dynamic or just absent, period. So all of those were different because I think most of the characters in the series had some kind of mother-daughter dynamic thing going on. They had some parent stuff going on. All of that was different. Big thing that was different that I thought was actually important to the plot that made it a little bit different is that Prim and Min's company in the novel is established. So they're not like on the rise. They're not this brand new company. They're an established company that's doing really well. And they only do fashion shows or fashion shoots exclusively. So they're not trying to do movies. They don't do I guess they do ad campaigns but it's fashion only. So the writer of the novel kept it in the fashion world. And you don't have that motivation with Prim and Min being like, we have to hustle because like we're trying to establish ourselves. Like all of that was taken away, and they're just like, they're good, go kind of thing. So that did change the plot, and it in my mind because it changes Min's motivation, Prim's motivation for working so hard. And so when you see them as workaholics in the novel, you're just like, they're just workaholics because they are. More so than they're like, it's the survival of the company. So that was a little bit different. Things that were missing, Aunt and Fa don't exist. So in the novel, Prow is the bartender at the unnamed lesbian bar. We don't even get it. It's not even called Blossom. It's just like the lesbian bar. Prow is the bartender. So we don't have any like foiling going on with Aunt Fa. You don't have like the elder queer Aunt Fa guiding all the youngins. You don't have the wedding. All of that is gone. And Prow is actually a bartender, not somebody who's like friends with the bartender kind of thing. So that's her tie to the group because she's in the bar. Gloria's backstory is also completely different. I'm cool with this change. So in the novel, her parents abandoned her at a really young age. I don't remember if they die or not. It's just like she says something like they're gone. So I don't, or they're disappeared, I think is the word that was translated in the novel. I don't know what that means. But basically Gloria has a really dark backstory where she had to survive all by herself without parents. And that's different than in the series where they gave her this really supportive family. So different. Speaking of darkness, how and why Bambi's ex dies, oh my god, was really dark and horrific and more traumatizing, in my opinion, than what they did in the series. So I'm glad they changed that too, but that is different. And the starting point of the novel is the same as the series, where it's like Prim on her having the sad girl birthday with the candle and the cake by herself. And then instead of it ending with like a wedding, the award show for Prim, it ends when Bambi launches her fashion line. So that's actually where it ends. So kind of like the halfway point of the series is where the novel actually ends, which makes sense because the novel is pretty short. But it's it's focused on like the fashion stuff, Bambi working with Prim and Min's company, them all intermingling from there, and then everything is wrapped up by the time we get to the launch of Bambi's new fashion line. So no wardrobe for Prim. All right. So now that I've gone through the key differences with the series, kind of just giving you the framework of that. Now I'm just going to focus on the novel essentially for the rest of this. And we'll start first with Prim, because Prim is the main character, I would say. Still, even reading this, it's pretty apparent. And like I mentioned earlier, my biggest thing was like Prim, when I was reading it and starting to read it, felt a lot more empathetic to me. And then I kept reading. So, because the first chapter starts off with Prim, with, sad girl Prim with the cake, and she's having all these thoughts, okay? And as the story keeps going, it just, when I was listening to Prim's inner monologue, like her thoughts, it felt to me like she was pretty self-aware of a lot of stuff that was going on. Whereas in the series, it seems like she's like, I don't know, like not aware or just like very self-centered. And then I'm listening and I'm like, okay, so Prim seems more like empathetic towards other people. Maybe people are right. They changed Prim's character. And then I was reading what other people would say about Prim and then really paying attention to what Prim does, not what she says in her brain. And it clicked that it's the exact same Prim from the series, where she thinks the opposite of what she actually does. So it's the same Prim. The thing that I did get from the novel that became much more apparent is that at one point in the series, Prow says that, oh, Prim's a thinker and like Min's a feeler. And I was like, is Prim a thinker? Like, I don't know. She seems to not think things through. But after being in her head through the novel, Prim is definitely a thinker. And she says at one point when Bambi comes back that she like recorded everything about Bambi in her memory, and like she thinks that. And listening to her inner monologue, like what she does, and that was like literally like everything, and she replays everything about her and Bambi over and over and over again, and so it became a lot more obvious to me by just like listening to her thoughts that Prim is the type of person who internalizes everything, and then tortures herself with her own thoughts. So at one point when like Bambi first comes back, like her brain just starts spiraling, and it's like question after question, all these like what ifs that she's clearly thought about in the interim of them not being together and Bambi breaking up with her, and just like tortured herself with, and they all come out, and it almost read like this pathological overthinking where it almost like she was having this panic attack of just like this bombardment of just like, well, what if this? What if that? What if that? What if that? What if, and at one point she like cuts herself off because like somebody like tries to get her attention. So it didn't come across to me in the series that way because, and I don't know if this was like an acting choice, this was how they wrote the character. I don't know. I will not know that answer. But Prim just seemed a lot more closed off in terms of her thoughts and feelings, and like perhaps that is because she's internalizing it, which would make sense. But in a screen adaptation, unless Prim says it out loud or we get like voiceovers with her thoughts, it's hard to tell that she's spiraling with thoughts, like just because the way Namtam played her was very stoic, like it's less clear there's a war waging inside of Prim by the way she played her. So it became a lot more evident that Prim's a thinker in the book because you just get these thoughts from her constantly. And so yeah, she definitely is an overthinker, almost pathologically sometimes, and she tortures herself with her thoughts. That became a lot more clear. I mean, in the series they do things like they show you she's thinking about the good moments with Bambi, but she thinks about the bad moments too, and that was not as clear because you get less of that with Prim. So I thought that was interesting, and it made her seem more empathetic to me because you heard her good thoughts and bad thoughts. When Bambi comes back to add to that, she spirals for 3 days and like doesn't get anything done at work and cannot concentrate and is a mess. So that was also different. Like we didn't see her really fall off her game when it came to work when Bambi comes back, but like in the novel she does. Okay, speaking of empathy, I would say overall in the novel, Bambi is way less empathetic, in my opinion. Okay, first of all, her first point of view chapter is titled The One Who Doesn't Play by the Rules. So it already sets her up in this like very negative light, like just reading the title. And to me, the characterization of Bambi in the novel is just she's much more of a spoiled princess. So she's the same in the fact that she avoids dealing with actual problems the way that Prim also avoids dealing with actual problems. But it's much more evident what her behavior pattern is in the novel. So because she says it in her inner monologue. So according to Bambi, to quote Bambi, she, quote, prefers to hide these feelings alone, meaning bad feelings, then cover them up by doing something extreme. That's Bambi according to Bambi. And so at one point, Bambi gets mad at her mother and then starts an electrical fire at this event and just leaves with a smile on her face. So she's way less empathetic, in my opinion, because she like she purposely sabotages other people, like purposely, not in a haha I'm fucking with you, in a I just started a fire at your event kind of way. So didn't love that. Other thing that was really different in Bambi's plotline is that her mother seemed a lot more controlling from Bambi's point of view. And in the novel, we only get Bambi's point of view when it comes to her mother and the relationship with her mother. But it's much more one-dimensional. The TV series started with this, oh, it's her mom's the bad guy, and then like was like, no, here's the full story kind of thing. Because GMMTV likes doing that, and that's kind of real life, where you have one person's point of view of a situation and their emotions are clouding it. And then when you take that character out and you look objectively, it's totally different. Novel didn't do that. They had this is one of those mother-daughter switches that was very, very different. And so the way Bambi's mother presents is she's very like in public. She cares more about public appearances than actual like stuff at home. So she's like comes off as like very elegant and professional in public. She's well respected. She's the queen of fashion. And Bambi essentially thinks her mother's behavior is performative and really fake. So, in order to get back at her mother, because she doesn't like that her mother's being fake, Bambi rebels and like acts out, which is also fake if you think about it, because Bambi's upset. And so then, because she's upset, she just sabotages stuff, which is a form of being fake. If she was really authentic about it, she would like confront her mother, but she doesn't. So, there's that. So they're more similar than they are different, actually, if you just kind of compare the thinking behavior kind of thing. And again, we don't get her mom's point of view, so we don't actually know, but we're just getting what Bambi thinks. The other thing about Bambi in the novel is that Bambi seems a lot more lost, just in general. Like, she doesn't seem to know what she wants. Her motivation is really that she just doesn't want what her mother wants for her, which again, like, Bambi doesn't know what she wants, but she's like, don't tell me what to do. I'm going to act out. That's basically Bambi's whole character. So to me, that was like, it made her less empathetic to me because she seemed more one dimensional than in the series. Like, I thought Bambi in the series had a lot of emotional depth, a lot of complexity. Here, it was like less of that. Other thing that was really different and interesting, and I'm not mad at, was Bambi's mother's relationship to Prim. So at one point, they have like one scene together where like Prim takes Bambi home. Like when Bambi was drinking a lot and gets really drunk, she takes her home. Like Prim takes her to her home, and Bambi's mom's there. And it's revealed that Bambi's mother hates Prim, like hates Prim, and thinks Prim because she thinks that Prim is mooshing off of Bambi. Because again, Bambi heiress to a big fashion empire, and then Prim is a fashion production company, the owner of a fashion production company. So she's like, "You're just using my daughter to get your business going," which if they don't really interact, that's not an unfair thing for Bambi's mom to think, especially because like at that point, Bambi like Prim just shows up out of nowhere in Bambi's life, kind of thing. So it's not unfair. And but then we never like come back to these characters. We never like really address this. And then we kind of like move on. So it seemed very one-dimensional, but very different dynamics when it came to Bambi's motivation for things, and then Bambi's home life was very, very different. Where Bambi does get empathetic is when we finally, at the end, get into what happened with the ex-girlfriend and why the ex-girlfriend died. That's when Bambi gets really empathetic. But kind of like the series, it's really rushed. We never get into it. We don't address the trauma of it. We just get the tragic backstory and then kind of like put a band-aid on it, and the story just ends kind of shortly after that. So but that made her super empathetic when you were like, oh shit, this is what happened to you. But also, it doesn't explain why you're so pissed off at your mom all the time. It doesn't. So Bambi to me made less sense as a character and was way less empathetic. Then we get to my girl, Goria. Goria, to me, was the most similar character in the novel to the series. Like, personality wise. Her, like, actions, events, backstory, different, but characterization wise, she felt the most similar to me. So she's still a little feisty Goria who constantly tells on herself when she says things and thinks things. So Goria's probably still my favorite. So all right, then we get a little bit more into like, so Goria at the beginning is pursuing Prim, and her reasons for pursuing Prim are revealed in the novel are not 100% pure of heart, being like, I've had this crush since I was a kid. They don't have that backstory. So they're working together in this fashion world and like running into each other. We don't really actually get an explanation. They're just like working together, and like Goria is going after Prim, basically. And this is what she thinks about Prim when she's like pursuing her. So this is Goria's monologue. Quote, with Prim, she was both the prize she hoped to win and the finish line she raced towards. And at the same time, she was also the trap. End quote. So I thought that was really interesting coming from Goria. Okay, because it seems like Gloria is invested in the challenge of Prim, not necessarily Prim the person, because she's saying she's the prize she hopes to win and the finish line she races towards, and also she's a trap. So like Gloria is that person who always she contradicts herself too, okay? Because again, it seems like it's a game for Gloria. It's more about the game and winning the game, hence comparing Prim to like a prize, a toy kind of thing. I'm saying those words on purpose because they come up in the novel. Because then when it comes to Sasha later, Gloria contradicts her own thoughts, where she's having bantering with Sasha about like, I don't want to date you, I don't want to get with you, and then she says to Sasha, quote, I like people who are serious, not someone who plays games. And then Sasha says, and how do you know the person you like doesn't see you as a toy? Because Sasha's from the outside looking in, she's being like, Prim is definitely toying with you, and you refuse to see it. And then you're claiming you don't want games, but then you're going after somebody who's playing games. But Gloria, in her own inner monologue, is almost like Prim going after Prim is like a game. So she just contradicts herself a lot. And I said that when watching the series, I'm like, I get the impression that Gloria actually likes games, and likes challenges and things like that, but she says she doesn't, but her actions say she does. And so like these inner monologues are much more, she tells on herself in her own inner monologue, which I thought was really interesting. And with that conversation with Sasha that I just kind of quoted, that interaction where Sasha's like, okay, you don't like games, but then the person you're going after sees you as a toy, Gloria leaves that interaction convinced that she was bantering with Sasha out of spite, because that conversation comes off the cusp of like Prim flat out ditching Gloria after leading her on, like immediately. And then so she's like, yeah, whatever. I'm bantering with Sasha because I fuck Prim. But then Sasha takes a different approach to that. And she's like, well, I think that Gloria is engaging with me because she likes playing games. And so honestly, like, both things can be true, and that's what makes Gloria interesting to me, that she is a contradiction in and of herself, because she says she doesn't want someone who plays games, but then admits to herself in her inner monologue without realizing it that she likes playing games. So I love that. So to me, Gloria, that was the Gloria we got in the series. But as I mentioned at the very beginning, a big key difference with Gloria is that her backstory is totally different. So yeah, like I mentioned earlier, her parents disappear. That's the word used. Don't know what that means. When she was really young. And basically the key of that is that Gloria has been deeply lonely ever since that happened. And at one point, she's in the car with Sasha, and she starts having a heart-to-heart with Sasha, and they like kind of pass this area where she grew up as a kid. And she's opening up to Sasha, and it's a really sweet moment, but also super tragic. Because she tells Sasha about her backstory, basically, quote, just the burden left by my parents before they disappeared is heavy enough. And she's a kid working to pay off debt. I don't even know when it will end, and I just don't have time to make friends. So Gloria, in her backstory, essentially was left to fend for herself, plus take care of the burden her parents left her, which was all this financial debt that she's still paying off to this day. Because Sasha's like, why don't you have friends? And this was the explanation that Gloria gave her. She's like, when the hell would I have time to do that? She's surviving all the time and by herself with no support. And then when they pass the area where she grew up, she tells Sasha this really devastating story about how when she was a kid, and anytime the school would need like a parent to show up for whatever, she doesn't give explanations, but like Parents' Day, I assume, like, I don't know, whenever parents would be invited to school, what Gloria would do as a kid would hire motorcycle drivers to cosplay her parents. And like she says, the school knew what I was doing, but like let me do it. It was just like the saddest fucking thing humanly possible. Like poor little baby Gloria hiring like Uber drivers to go with her to like parent events. Like that's so, just so she'd have somebody. Like that's so sad. And the minute she says that, Sasha's like, wow, this is why we connect, because you also understand my deep loneliness. Like that is some next level. That is some deep-seated loneliness, hiring Uber drivers to come play your parents. Like, poor Goria. So yeah, this was a huge thing. So like Goria like turned out to be kind of the same person where she contradicts herself, but like how she got there was it was a lot more struggling compared to the Goria in the series. On the flip side of that, in the B plot, which I would argue in the novel, Goria and Sasha are like the C plot, but I digress. Speaking of Sasha, Sasha to me in the novel was the least fleshed out character. The least. She's like Prow in the series. She's like the least going on. Okay. She has no tragic backstory. There's no mention of her family. There's really not much to Sasha. She's described in the beginning as a serious, work obsessed, and a perfectionist, where Sasha takes modeling very seriously. And basically, they describe this from Sasha's point of view that she basically like work herself like nonstop until she has health problems, and then her manager has to intervene to stop her before she hurts herself, kind of thing. So Sasha's more of a workaholic because she wants to be versus like this manipulation thing they did in the series. So in the novel, like that is the only time her manager is mentioned, is like that quick sentence where she's being described as like a workaholic, basically. And then the manager never comes up again. And it's and that characterization holds true where Sasha takes modeling super seriously, because there's a couple of scenes with Prim's company and when Bambi hire Sasha to go in there and help her launch the brand. They have a lot of like meetings with Prim's production company where they're going over like location, the concept of the shoot, the clothing, like all those little details with Bambi, because Bambi is very involved and has to sign off on it. And Bambi has Sasha in the meetings too to contribute. And Sasha is very vocal about stuff and is like in a constructive way, not in a I'm doing this to be a diva way. So it shows that like Sasha really does take the modeling seriously. It takes the art of what she's doing seriously, and she's like, I think that I should be doing these poses to convey this if that's the goal. And like, so she's actually very productive and not just like she shows up, does what she's told, and leaves kind of thing. So I think the characterization in the novel of Sasha being a workaholic and taking her modeling seriously, I think there's evidence to back that up, like in those scenes. But we really don't get much about Sasha. So to go back to what I was saying with her and Goria, where they have that conversation about being lonely, Sasha is canonically deeply lonely, and she finds that kinship in Goria. It's like a trauma recognizes trauma situation. But we don't get any explanation in the novel, like why Sasha's so lonely, other than the fact that she's a workaholic. There is no like, I've been doing this since I was young. Like, we get none of that. None of that. It's just that she says she's deeply lonely and recognizes that in Goria. And other thing that was different is that Sasha doesn't seem to have friends. We don't dwell on why or get into why. It seems like her and Bambi form a kind of like friendship, but it's more like a work friendship, and it happens off screen, which is different. And I would have preferred in the novel, because Bambi gets into like they actually honestly I'm okay with it in the novel, because I'll get into why Bambi doesn't do that, but I would have preferred to see more moments of them, because Sasha describes her deep loneliness but then puts it all into Goria, not like pursuing other friends. But it's a very short story. What doesn't change is that Sasha is incredibly sweet with Goria, and that part does not change. Like, their relationship is still very sweet, and again, fits what I mentioned at the beginning, their like perspectives on love, and it meets, and it's really beautiful. So that part doesn't change, but like who Sasha is, how much we get of her, is really a lot of that's not there. It's like implied, quick dialogue. To me, she was again the least developed character in the story, which was kind of sad because she's one of my favorites, but then also like I'm glad we get these two different versions of her. The character I think that was much more fleshed out in place of Sasha was Min. And I think perhaps this really honestly, sadly boiled down to who was cast as Sasha and who was cast as Min, because Milk is probably the number two on this project. And so they had to give that character a lot more if she's the higher ranked actor versus Min, who is played by View, which is really sad because I thought Min in the book was great. And honestly, like they could have recast, but hey, we got what we got. And I'm not mad at it. It's just they're different and these are they're companion stories. That's all. So in general, Min got a lot more. Min and Prowl were more the B plot. They had a lot more going on than Goria and Sasha. And when it comes to looking at Min, I think that in the novel, there's a lot more insight into why Min is a workaholic. It's mentioned a lot in the series. She's a workaholic. She has no work-life balance, but like why she's a workaholic is a lot more explicit, particularly in Min's inner monologue. So at one point, Min thinks, quote, "In truth, work was what saved her. Without work to occupy her mind, she would have no respite from other, much heavier stresses that made her feel lonely, empty, and cold, even in a country with no real winter." So this was coming at the very beginning of the story, okay, for context. And so what Min is saying in that thought is that work is escapism for her. If she's busy, like so busy, she can't think too much about her relationship with Park. Because that was at the time when she was in that relationship, and it's not playing out the way it should, right? According to Disney and fairy tales and what everybody, the society tells her about love, kind of thing. It's not working out. And Min's like, what's wrong? That's not working out. Instead of thinking about it, I'll just go to work. Work will be my happiness in place of this thing when I go home, where it feels like winter. It's so like barren, desolate, hopeless, that kind of thing. So that's why that's her motivation for being a workaholic. Whereas I think in the series, they were more like, Min's the business manager and like they're up and coming and they have to work hard for survival. No, it's more explicit that like this is an escapism from her home life kind of thing. The other thing about Min that was different, and I have positive and negative feelings about this, was we got a lot more insight into her relationship with Park. The positive is that I liked seeing this in the novel to get more context. But the negative is if they would have done this in the series, we would have had more scenes with Park. So I'm like, glad we don't, but also I think this is important. So that's just my personal opinion on this. So anyway, so I will read this so you don't have to see it. But the first scene with him where they're fighting at the club, basically what goes down there is he starts getting a lot more physical with her when he's trying to get her to leave. And then Prow is the one who comes in and stops it. And it's revealed essentially in that scene that like he shows up unannounced when Min is at the club because they took a client out. Like she's there for work. It's not, I mean, I think it is Prim's birthday, but like they're not there for Prim's birthday. They're there to take a client out. And she's the producer, business manager, whatever. And it's like, I'm here with a client. He shows up unannounced to pick her up. And he's like, we have to go now because I have to meet my friends to play video games. And she's like, I didn't even ask you to come here and you're here and you're mad that I'm going to make you late for something I didn't ask you to do. So Park is cast as an incel gamer loser, which totally makes sense, actually. And then the reason Min stays with him is because basically the rationale is like he sees a future with her and she thinks that means he loves her, kind of thing. And I think this is like comp het conditioning without being explicitly said, that we're like, oh, if a man is serious about you and wants to marry you and have kids with you, that means you should marry that person because the whole point of this is to have a secure future. And if he sees it, it must be true. And so like she holds on to that. And she's like, okay, this is what I've been told love means. And then Min thinks about it more and more when she's like confronted with it and comes to realize that like she doesn't see a future with him. Like it's not reciprocated on her end. And so she sticks it out for so long because she's like waiting for that part of her to change. Like she's waiting for it to change. She's waiting to see the future with him and she never ever does. And it's a lot more explicit in the novel when you're in her head and she's thinking these things. And also her and Park have more scenes, and they actually like talk about this at one point. And she's flat out says these things to him in the breakup. It's not, they don't break up at the club. They have more scenes after this scene where Prow stops the domestic violence, basically. And so overall, when reading Min's journey in the story, it read as much less of a comp het plotline. Like, yes, everything I just said, I think comes from the comp het life. And if you don't know what that term means, it means compulsory heterosexuality, essentially where heterosexuality is presented as the default in society in the way you grew up. So a lot of people are indoctrinated to believe that like that is the default and don't conceptualize relationships outside of that. And so a lot of their behavior is this compulsory thing, meaning it's not organic, it's not natural to that person per se, or it's not necessarily what they want. They're doing it because that's what they were told was love, which is exactly what Min was saying, which was like, he sees a future, therefore I must pick him, and I just need to wait until I also love him. But the love never comes because it's this compulsory behavior. So, and in the series, we get more into like comp het, typical tropey plotline stuff. And the novel was less about that. It is true that in the novel, Min is still like canonically, quote, straight before Prow. She does flat out say that. But the sexuality crisis, the sexuality of it all, was not really the point in the story. The focus in the novel was that Min never knew the meaning of good love, like the editor said at the beginning, until she meets Prow. And Prow is like super kind and like supportive and like wants to know what Min thinks. And it's very different and opens up Min's eyes to like what good love could be. Not just like this person that sees a future with you but then treats you like garbage versus this person that sees you. And Prow's understanding and kindness completely changes Min's life, which is so sad when you think about it, but that was really the focus of Min's evolution, of Min and Prow's story. It wasn't so much Prow's a woman. There are elements of that 100% because we do get into Min's parents like briefly and things like that, but the focus was a lot more about their connection and how Prow as a person like not necessarily changed Min, but like really gave her an epiphany and put the meaning of love into context. And Min was able to be herself, Prow was able to be herself, and like her life changed for the better. And that's really what their story was about, which I really liked and I think fit more with the purpose of the story, going back to like what the editor was trying to do and or what the author was trying to do and what the editor said about like good love and its different forms. I think this hit that a lot more than like focusing on the sexuality part and like coming out and the PDA. But that realistically would have potentially been part of Min's story because like the comp het stuff is there. It's just not the focus. So series did not do a bad thing or really do a disservice to this. Like this is all there. It's just like they added more of the comp het elements to it because it is a comp het story. It's just focused on less in the novel. All right, last but not least, our last main character and what I thought about them is, to me, big thing is Proud to me read as a lot more mature than she did in the series. There is an age gap canonically here. It's mentioned that Prow was a few years younger than Min. But other than that little like throwaway line, it doesn't read that way at all. The way in the series it's very harped on that Prow is young. So things about Prow. So I mentioned at the very beginning of this that Prow is a freelance photographer, but also a bartender at the lesbian bar. And Prow explains why she does both. Basically, Prow was having a hard time getting into photography, which is true, just like the series. So she bartends to support herself. But there's more to those two careers than just the money aspect. So at some point, Min asks her about it, and Prow explains this, quote, photography is like getting to know a person's external image. Being a bartender lets you talk and get to know their inner self. For me, both are enjoyable. Which I thought was really insightful for Prow. So, because like Prow to me reads as like this super optimistic, very empathetic person. And that response right there about like why she loves photography and why she loves being a bartender, I think perfectly encapsulate like how Prow loves. To me, it's like she loves fully, and both like who you are physically, who you are out in the world, and then who you are emotionally, who you are on the inside, like physically and mentally, like in your soul, like all of that. Like that's Prow. She's like a holistic type of partner, and she genuinely enjoys people, like who they are, who they say they are, like how they present themselves, finding those hidden scars with like the photography type stuff. Like I thought that was really insightful to Prow as a character, and I really liked that line. And I liked keeping her as a bartender, honestly, because she kind of like is like Min's therapist sometimes, which can be a bartender's role, because people get drunk and open up, and Prow is a very good listener, so it very much fit Prow as a person. So I did like this in the novel. And to piggyback off of that, when it comes to interacting with Min, she's very optimistic and very empathetic towards Min. There is no come out so we can be a couple and do normal things. There is none of that. Prow is incredibly understanding of Min's situation. Again, it's really not about the compat stuff. It was more so about their connection. Because at some point we get to um Min's family, and the way it goes down in the novel is I kind of like the way they did this. Basically, they start living together at one point, and then they're coming home from the grocery store to cook dinner, and Min's family is in the apartment, which, okay, they're already in there. And they're like, oh my God, Min, we surprised you. We brought a bunch of food. And then Prow's there, and Min introduces Prow as her friend because she's like, I wasn't planning on doing this. This is weird. I didn't even know you were going to be here. And the family's like, okay, yeah, your friend can come in too. And they have this big dinner together, and like the family loves her. And it's just the mom and dad. And they absolutely love Prow. They start calling Prow our daughter. She can call them mom and dad. It goes really well. Like they love Prow. Because like, how could you, based on this description, how could you not love Prow? Like Prow is great. Prow is really sweet. And so they love her. And then they go to, later on in the novel, Min and Prow go to Min's parents' house and to have dinner. And they invite Prow, and like they're having a great time. And then dinner's over, and Min goes in the kitchen to clean the dishes, and Prow's in there. And she's like, Prow, you cannot clean the dishes. You're a guest. Like that's a big no-no in this house. And they're talking, and at some point Min kisses Prow, and then mom walks in on that. And then a 180 happens where the parents turn on Prow, like immediately. Once they realize that they're dating, they turn on Prow. And Prow walks away from that situation. And her explanation is like, she's like, I don't want to cause you any problems, Min, with your family. So I'm going to walk away from this, because clearly, because she says stuff to the parents. She's like, I don't understand. You loved me a second ago, then found this thing out about me, and now you don't like me anymore based off this one thing, not about who I am. And I think Prow's the type of person who like is authentically who she is. And she's like, I can't change who I am. And she's like, I'm not going to change the fact that I love Min. I'm not going to change that. So she's like, I'm going to walk away to not cause Min problems with her family. And she tells that to Min. So, which to me fit Prow a lot as a person who's very empathetic, very understanding, and like doesn't make things about herself. So this characterization of Prow I really enjoyed, and this sequence of events I really enjoyed with Prow. So to me, overall, like it just made her read as like a lot more of a mature person based on a lot of her actions and her dialogue with Min. But there are hints in there that Prow is a young person, because at one point when Min first sees Prow, like when Park shows up and is like doing domestic violence and shit, and her first visualization of Prow is Prow emerging from a cloud of vape smoke. So Prow canonically vapes, and like she would, like she super would vape. Like she's that person who totally would be vaping outside of a club. So Prow has multitudes, is what I'm saying. And I enjoyed this version of Prow. She felt like a meteor type of character, and I liked her dynamic with Min a lot. It read as very more equitable, I guess, is what I would say about that. All right, now that I've gone through all the characters and what they're like in the novel, I just want to take a very, very quick break to give some shout out to our Chaos crew over on Patreon. Woo! Go Patreon! Yay! Okay, so I want to give a big shout out to our Big Gay Energy Ride or Die Tier or Above members. You guys are our absolute loves of our lives. You guys pay at least $15 a month. This tier gets access to bonus episodes we try to put out once a week to keep you guys entertained, especially for you based on what you want. This tier also gets voting power, so you can thank them for our up and coming new series we'll have coming out soon called, I think we're going to call it Forever in Our Hearts. So be curious about that. So thank them for that content coming out. This tier also gets a shout out in every single one of our episodes. So to this tier, a big, big thank you to amixmonzone_multi, Andreas, Ash You So Stunnin', BJR, Brianna, Caroline R, Chloe, Danny, Isla, L, girlfriend_J_XIX, here for it, Jasmine O, Jill L, Kayoshi, Cassie M, Kelsey S, Leona, Livia A, Lovely Things, Michelle G, MM230403, Monet F, Moving Forward Leading, Nasira, Pooja S, Regina B, Sarah B, and Worshipin. Woo! Thank you all for your continued support, and thank you for voting. Next up is our biggest, largest tier. You guys are our support in which we stand on. These are our big gay supporter members. So for $5, they get early access to all of our content. They get ad-free content. And what could you not possibly love about that? So this tier, because there are so many of you, I am going to give shout outs to the tier members who have been engaging with our Girl Love content consistently over on Patreon. And I love every one of your comments. Enjoy your engagement. Hope you're watching this too. So big shout out to Mary L, Kayoshi, Charlotte C, Whitecat112, and Tara718. Thank you guys for making our Girl Love content even more special and for participating and adding to the conversation. If you want to add to the conversation, make your voice heard, and meet friends who also love the same content you love, check out our Discord link in the description and join for free. It's a lot of fun over there. You can keep up with what the hell is going on in the Thai Girl Love world, because that's where we get our news, honestly, is Discord. Meet some friends, talk to us, have a fun time over there. That's free. The link is in the description. Same thing for Patreon. If you want to check that out, link is in the description. I think you can also do a 7-day free trial if you just want to check out what Patreon is like. The world is your oyster. Do what you want to do. Now that we've gone through all the characters and given love to Patreon, let's continue with the story. So the way the novel happens is the first convergence of all the main characters happens at the unnamed lesbian bar. So we end up there because Prim and Min's company wraps up this photo shoot with the client. And the client is like, hey, I want to celebrate because you guys did a great job. Prim, where should we go? And Prim's like, let's go to my favorite bar, the lesbian bar. So we don't show up there because a bunch of queers want to hang out. We show up there because Prim decides to take her not queer client to a gay bar. So, which is one of those Prim things ever. Like she would. And she does. So they're all there. And the people that worked on this project were Prim, Min, Goria, and Sasha. Sasha was the model. Sasha's not hanging out with them to begin with. She's like prowling or doing whatever. But in the beginning, it's the client and the crew, right? Which includes Goria. So Goria and Prim start flirting. At some point, Prim walks away. And then Min warns Goria, don't pursue that because Prim's fucked up, basically. While that's going on, separately, Bambi shows up with a group of friends. I know, friends, right? She shows up there after literally setting fire to her mother's, I don't even know what this was, like meeting of like minds or like her showing off her company, Bambi starts an electrical fire, leaves, calls her friends to this gay bar and is like, let's get super blackout drunk like we used to back in the day. And as they're hanging out, it becomes very apparent that they've grown apart. And the friends comment at one point, Bambi's like, why can't we just do what we used to do? And the friends are like, listen, it's been years since we've seen you. You went to America, you disappeared, you never contacted us. Now here you are showing up out of the blue. We came to see you. And yeah, I guess things have changed. And so Bambi's frustrated that she's stuck in the same place, like emotionally, that she was many years ago before leaving, and the friends have moved on. Okay, which sets up Bambi really well, and also Prim. So then Prim, who was flirting with Goria, spots Bambi at the bar. Because remember, they don't know. They're both there. She spots Bambi and then literally ignores Goria from here on out. Like, Goria's like talking to her mid-sentence, and Prim literally only sees Bambi with other people, and then is like, wow, she moved on. Can't believe she moved on. I need to move on. I should have moved on a long time ago. I'm going to move on. And that motivates Prim to keep pursuing Goria, even though she literally can't stop thinking about Bambi the whole time. Okay, so Prim starts ignoring Goria and then like fucks off at some point. And then Sasha, who has been prowling, swoops in and then starts flirting with Goria and is like, yeah, you know that girl's not paying attention to you, really. Because Sasha is incredibly perceptive. That never changes. Okay, so that clusterfuck of gay shit is going on inside the bar. Then at some point, Min, who's doing the job of entertaining the client while Prim is trying to pick up women because she's an idiot and is trying to spite Bambi. Now, Min gets a call from Park and then goes outside because he shows up unannounced to pick her up. Because I mentioned this earlier, but he basically volunteers to pick up Min while she's at a work thing and is rushing her to get out of there because he has to meet his friends to play video games. And then at one point, Min points this out. She's like, I didn't ask you to pick me up. And then he gaslights her by being like, oh, it's my fault. I'm the bad guy. I came to do a nice thing. And then he starts getting physical with her. At one point, he throws her into a wall. The client at some point comes out because it's like, where's Min? And then sees like the violence happening. And Min starts getting embarrassed because like, look at this. And then Prow emerges from a cloud of smoke to come like stop this. It's just like a clusterfuck of a first meeting of everybody. So it really is a good convergence for all of them to kind of interact. And it's just a disaster. Like the first meeting of stuff. It's just so many disaster things are happening. It's just a wild setup, honestly. Something I really liked about the novel, in addition to the clusterfuck first meeting, was that Min and Prim's friendship is a lot more fleshed out in this novel. So it's revealed that they met at university, and then we get a little bit of context of like what university was like for Min and Prim. And it was toxic even back then, because I always joke, I'm like, Prim and Min's relationship seems a little toxic. And the novel confirms it, okay? So essentially, Prim was going to be a director or whatever, and then Min was like in more like the business area, obviously, because that's what they end up doing. And in I think this is Min's thought, I can't remember, but basically it was describing university, and basically, quote, Prim cherished the thrill of not knowing oh, maybe this is Prim. Okay, I'm sorry. This is Prim explaining why she loves photography or whatever. Quote, from Prim's brain. Prim cherished the thrill of not knowing exactly how her carefully composed pictures would turn out. Her solitary nature meant she didn't have many friends. Indicating that even back then, Prim loves chaos. And that makes her attraction to Bambi makes a hell of a lot more sense when you have that context. She loves the unknown. She gets off on it. Okay, makes sense. Okay. So that was Prim describing like why she loved not just photography, but particularly why she loved like being in the dark room. So not just like digital photography where you upload it, you get your image. When I was in high school, I did that. I learned digital and then also like old school photography where you take it on film and like you do not know how your pictures come out until you're in the dark room developing them and you get to see the negatives and like project it and stuff. So Prim's talking about that piece, the dark room stuff, which again, dark room, Bambi. There's so many red flags with these two. It's really writes itself really. So Prim's talking about how she loves that unknown of classic film, I guess. And then this thought keeps going, okay? And it's revealed that in university, Prim would skip class to hang out in the dark room, while Min was studious going to class and helped her and was probably the only reason Prim graduated. That's a direct quote, by the way. So Prim would skip class and then rely on Min to take notes and cover for her. Like, Prim was ridiculous even then, okay? Poor Min. Oh my god. Okay, so there's that aspect of their friendship that's a lot more like I sensed it, but like here's evidence, okay? And then the other thing that I really love that happens a lot more, as it should in the novel, is that Min sees right through Prim's bullshit. Okay? Particularly when Bambi comes back and Prim is much more in her bullshit era than she normally is. So Bambi comes back and basically, just like in the show, she shows up at Prim and Min's company and is like, this is a new brand. I want to launch it. I'm hiring you guys. Here's a ton of money or whatever. And then they start having work meetings about what it's going to look like and all that kind of stuff. And Prim's a hot mess, basically, in these meetings because she cannot separate her personal feelings from her business, even though she says she can. Because Prim never sticks to what she says. She just does the opposite. Okay. So then Min calls her out on it, basically. And Min's like, I'm sorry, Prim starts and she says, of course not. I went straight to work and haven't answered her calls since. See, I'm smart too. I'm not going back to being a fool waiting for her a second time. And then Min replies, Min raises an eyebrow in disbelief. Quote, really? You? The one who ran back to her before? Like, again, just here's evidence of Prim. Prim talks real, I think right after that, Min says something like, you're a real tough talker, but like you're full of shit. Like, meaning Prim is notorious for saying one thing and then doing the opposite. And Min rightfully calls her out on that. And like, Prim at one point laughs and she's like, yeah, you're calling me out on my bullshit. Like, she knows she's full of shit. Like, okay. It's the same Prim, guys. But Min is a lot more tougher with her, which somebody like Prim needs, especially because, like, not to hate on Prim, but like Prim is an overthinker, okay? So Prim gets stuck in her thoughts, okay? And it's like I get like this sometimes too, where I get stuck in my thoughts and I can't break out of my thoughts until somebody or something external forces me out of my internal monologue. So I think that that's what Min brings to Prim is she's the one who's like, you're full of shit right now. I can tell. You're posturing. You're saying tough things, but ultimately you're weak and you're going to cave. And I need to point reality out to you and get you out of these thoughts so you can think clearly. I think that's what Min brings to Prim, and that's a good thing. What Prim brings to Min, I don't know. I wish that was more clear. I wish. Because in the novel, it almost seems like when it comes to Min's relationship with Park, the P names, it seems like Min hides it from Prim. Because at one point when Park's fighting with her, she's like, oh man, I especially don't want Prim to know about this. Like, she thinks that. So I don't know how much Prim is calling out Min, or if Min's like, oh, Prim will call me out on this, like I'm being hypocritical too. I don't know how much they share. It's kind of unclear, but it seems more like on Prim's side that they're sharing, or at least calling each other out, more about Prim's behavior than Min's. Okay. Thing that I hate, but is very different in the book, is Prim leads on Goria for like half the novel. I'm not even kidding. At least half the novel, okay? And for all those out there who are like, oh, Prim's character was defiled by the series, it was not. Prim in the novel knowingly leads on Goria. Knowingly, for 50% of the book. Okay? So, after the convergence, where she sees Bambi at the bar, That's when Prim is like, wow, you moved on, fuck you, Bambi, I'm gonna move on. And she tries to hook up with Goria out of spite, really? Because she's like, you moved on, I'm gonna prove I moved on. So it's really to spite Bambi, not because of Goria. It's mostly to spite Bambi. And also, Prim is frustrated. She cannot get over Bambi because she's trapped in the maze, right? And it's revealed that at that night at the bar, where they're there for the client, it's also Prim's birthday. But it's not made out to be Prim's celebration for her birthday. In fact, we didn't even know that until we get towards the end of the evening and Goria wishes Prim a happy birthday. She's the only one, by the way, who wishes Prim a happy birthday. And she's like, at the point where she does that, she's frustrated with Prim because Prim saw Bambi and is ignoring Goria, basically. So Goria wishes her a happy birthday and then is like, I'm leaving. So then Prim, instead of letting Goria leave, grabs Goria's wrist and asks, will you be the one to bring me happiness tonight? Okay? Because it's not about Goria. Because Prim, before saying all that, has is in this pit of loneliness, okay? Because she sees Bambi moving on, she's not moved on, and so she says to herself that she now is feeling extremely lonely, okay? And so then she's like, okay, fuck you, Bambi, and then basically invites Goria back to her place. So anyway, so it's unclear if Prim is doing this to genuinely move on, to spite Bambi, both, knowing Prim it's both. Anyway, Goria gets the warning from Min earlier in the evening not to pursue this. And Min explicitly tells her because Prim already has someone in her heart. And she says that even as Min is watching Prim actively lead Goria on. She's watching this and it's like, listen. Okay, so Prim knows she is leading Goria on. And then it keeps getting worse, okay? And then it's revealed by Prim and Min on 2 separate occasions that Prim has done this being leading women on, with more women than, to quote Prim, more women than she can count on her fingers of both hands. Prim literally says that at one point. Like, literally says that. Okay? So to me, it makes Prim worse because Prim is self-aware of this behavior. She knows she's doing this and still does it, okay? And at one point, when her and Bambi start interacting more, they get into a jealousy moment with Bambi, and Bambi calls her out on this and is like, wow, you're just spreading the charm everywhere. And Prim's like, yep, that's what I'm doing. So to me, it makes it worse that like Prim keeps hurting people knowing she's doing this. And at one point, Goria calls out Prim, like properly. There's a scene in the series where Goria's like, you were never going to pick me, right? The way it goes down in the novel, I love the dialogue because Goria more so calls out Prim for her shitty behavior and basically says to, not basically, to quote Goria, to Prim, she says, quote, you've hurt many people. Do you think the good feelings others have for you are just toys? Because at one point, Prim is like, well, I did have good feelings for you. I did. Like, I do. Kind of thing. And then Goria's like, okay, but like, what about what the other people were feeling for you, Prim? And you just hurt them knowingly. And the fact that Goria calls it toys, to me, was like Sasha's influence, because Sasha kept saying, like, Prim is toying with you. Prim is toying with you. Prim is toying with you. And then finally, at some point, Goria sees it, that Prim does toy with women, like, knowingly does this, like, more than 20 times, okay? And then finally, Goria is like, does your bit of happiness really justify all the people you've hurt along the way? Prim, you know you're hurting these people? So Prim is still the worst, guys. Okay, Prim is the actual worst. She's the worst character, and that's okay. She's still interesting, and she still does caring stuff in the book. She is still she's still empathetic. Like, she's a human being, but like, she sucks. She's the worst. Okay. All right. And okay, so it doesn't just stop there. So then Prim tries again once Bambi is back, okay? Because that's like the setup night. And then, okay, poor Goria. They end up back at the gay bar, okay? And Goria that night isn't drinking. This is before she calls out Prim for being the worst person, by the way. This is another time at the bar. And Goria isn't drinking. And like Prim's like, oh, why aren't you drinking? And Goria says, quote, she would lose control and do something she'd regret again. Like that day she followed Prim back into her room. That's what Goria thinks. So like poor Goria. Like Goria keeps getting like traumatized by this thing with Prim. Okay. She's like, I can't even have proper fun because I'm afraid I'm gonna make a mistake, like hit on Prim again. Get my heart broken. But the thing about Goria's situation is that it's not this one-sided situation where like only Prim is guilty. Like the other thing is like the red flags are there. People are warning Goria. And then Goria actively hopes Prim will choose her. Okay, so like she's a participant in this by actively hoping, active. Okay, it's not a passive thing happening to Goria. She's actively participating in this. So she thinks, even though I can't let go of my feelings yet, Goria thought, I have to have dignity to not cross lines anymore unless the other party crosses them first. So basically, she's like, listen, I'm not going to do anything. But if she does something, I'm not going to say no. So, like, and from Goria's point of view and Prim's point of view, like, when feelings are involved, humans don't always make great decisions. So it's understandable. But it's a lot more clear that, like, they're both right and they're both wrong kind of thing. Prim's more wrong because she keeps doing it over and over again. Okay, so then Goria has that attitude where she's actively hoping. So it facilitates a situation for Prim to lead her on again. Okay, so then they start talking, and Prim says to Goria, I want to really move on from her, meaning baby, for real this time. Prim whispers, taking a sip of beer. Goria listened with a calm demeanor, but inside her heart was beating fast because she hopes. This was the first time Prim had opened up to her about this, and her tone felt genuine. Okay. So Goria gets sucked back in whenever Prim actually is truthful or sounds truthful, not just like she's posturing as some bullshit. Okay. Then Prim says, the thing between us should just be in the past now. It shouldn't be both the present and the future. So talking about Bambi, meaning like I have to move on. It can't be, I can't still have feelings for her now. I need to move on. And then it continues. At the end of the sentence, Prim turned to look at Goria as if to prove she was speaking the truth. So I thought that prove was really interesting because it sounds to me like Prim is trying to convince herself this is true. Like prove, yeah. I'm gonna move on. Yeah, I'm gonna move on. I'm gonna move on. Even though Prim is trapped in the maze and she knows she's trapped in the maze, she's desperate to not be in the maze, even though there's no exit. She's checked everywhere. And so she's like trying to prove that she's not like stuck, but she's stuck and she's very aware she's stuck. Okay. Let's get into let's transition a bit more into Prim and Bambi. So that's the Prim and Goria stuff. So it's a lot. It goes on for much longer. Poor Goria. Okay, so then to transition to Prim and Bambi. So after the bar, Bambi then at the first bar meeting, the convergence, Bambi crashes Prim and Goria's almost hookup. And the way this goes down a little bit differently. So Bambi does show up with the birthday cake at Prim's house or Prim's apartment, and like crashes this. And to be fair to Prim in the novel, like Prim does try to get Bambi to leave. Like she legitimately not like caves to Bambi the way she does in the series. She does try to get Bambi to leave. And Goria is the one who steps in and is like, don't worry about it. You guys seem to have things to work out or whatever. You guys catch up. I'm gonna leave. Goria is the one that does that. Prim is more like, Bambi, you need to like leave. And then Bambi stays the night because she's drunk or whatever. And Prim is gone the next morning, and we are brought back into the scene from Bambi's point of view the next morning. And another point to Prim is more empathetic in the novel is that when Bambi wakes up, it's really clear that Prim is a very good caretaker from the way what Bambi notices, essentially. So to quote what Bambi thinks, the first thing when she wakes up. On the sofa, there was a thick blanket. Prim must have covered her with it last night. Bambi looked around the room. On the dining table, not far from the sofa, was a bowl of food with a lid. She opened it. The aroma of rice with minced pork rose. Beside it was a hangover medicine and a hastily handwritten note from Prim. So Prim got up early, made Bambi breakfast, was considerate of the fact that she's gonna need medicine, water. The note says "fuck you" and leave, basically. But still, she's again. Prim says these things and then does all these actions that completely contradict what she's saying. So that's incredibly caretaking and incredibly sweet what she did, showing that she cares, even though the note she leaves her says "get out, never come back." And Bambi knows this because she knows Prim well enough and like ends up smiling and it's like, yeah, you still care. All right. Other thing that was really interesting in the story is why Bambi starts the fashion line. So the fashion line is not called Fiona. It's called it's called Breakfast and Bed. Sorry. And it's supposed to be this like fashion line that's like high scale but looks like the average person could afford it. It's like a sophisticated version of what the everyday person needs. I'm like, okay, real rich coming from a princess, but sure. So that was the point of all of this. And the reason she does it is because she's essentially taking her mother up on an opportunity to help with the business. So it's not Bambi's idea necessarily. Mom's like, why don't you just fucking help me get a real job and help me? And so Bambi agrees. And then she chooses Prim's company to help launch it. And at some point, her and Prim get in this argument. And Prim is confronting her about that choice, basically. And she's like, why did you come back into my life? Like, why choose me? And Bambi says, I just want to have something I can do well. My life's path has been dictated by my mother. And I think that Bambi specifically chooses Prim because on some level, Bambi trusts Prim to help her achieve this. And so like she feels alone and desperate to get out of whatever life her mother, again, Bambi's motivation is rebelling against mom and she doesn't want what her mom wants. So the only person she thinks she can trust to help her achieve that is Prim. And I think that is actually why she picks Prim for this. Not just because she's trying to get Prim back. It's more so like I trust Prim on this level that I don't trust anybody else. And at some point, Min vocalizes that later to Prim when they're just talking and about this, like one-on-one, and Prim's lamenting to Min. And Min's like, maybe she actually trusts your skills the most when it comes to launching this. And I think that's part of it, but I think she also just trusts Prim on like a friendship level, on a like human to human level. But I definitely think that's part of it. So I liked that motivation more so than this is jealousy driven, this is I'm here to get you back driven. It was deeper than that, why she chose Prim's company. So I liked this dialogue and that was in there. And I think that sure, you can also argue like Bambi also does want Prim back. And I think both of those things can be true, but I think this adds to it, that explanation. At some point, Prim calls Bambi out for being privileged, and it also ties into her motivation. And then Bambi blows up, basically on Prim, and says, you're not me. You don't understand how suffocating it is to constantly try to fit into my mother's mold. And then Prim counters with, your mother's, quote, mold is as vast as the ocean. Because she's pointing out the fact that, like, mom's mold really isn't this, like, restrictive thing in any way, shape, or form. She's like, Bambi, I just want you to behave in public, continue the family legacy if you possibly can. That's it. And Prim's like, that's not, like, this is the most privileged mold, period, and you're complaining about this. But Bambi has a point that, like, you're not me. I'm suffocated. You know, I have a right to like be my own person too. And it just a lot of Bambi's motivation is just like rebelling. But I do appreciate that we get some of her how she feels about it more so because like being an outsider looking in like Prim is, it's like girl, you're mad you have to be the queen. Like it's like you're mad you're privileged versus like Bambi's like okay think about like be me for a second and like look at my relationship with my mother and like you know, it's like the you don't know until you walked a mile in my shoes kind of thing. So I did like that a little bit, but again, it still reads to me as like Bambi's rebelling against mom. And that's to me, Bambi seemed a lot more immature than like Prow. Honestly, now that I'm thinking about this, which I didn't expect going into this. Okay, something that was different about Prim and Bambi's relationship that I actually kind of liked and thought was interesting was how they kind of get back together, okay? And like the path they end up taking. So basically, in the context of like, why are you back in my life? This kind of stuff, Bambi brings up that she wants them to be friends. So in the series, like they're already quote friends, and then they end up not being friends. Here, Bambi's like, I want to be friends with you because I want you in my life. I don't want to date you. Like Bambi's not on a mission to like date Prim, and we get into why once we get into what happened with the ex-girlfriend shit. But she wants Prim in her life. Okay. And we finally get like some context from Bambi to Prim because up till this point, reading the book, there's a lot of context to like Prim being a mess, Prim being trapped, Prim trying to move on and it's not working, and she's hurting all these women knowingly and all this kind of stuff. And then when they're talking here at one point in her apartment, Bambi explains how she feels, and she says, after breaking up with you, it's not just you who's a mess. I'm broken too. I just realized that apart from you, I don't have a single genuine friend. Everyone associates with me because I'm the daughter of Pim Yanin, meaning because of my mother. Only you, Prim. Only you ever truly valued me for who I am. And I think maybe that's the other thing she resents about her mother, perhaps Bambi. She's like, you're a brand, basically, and people look at me and they see the brand that is my mother, and they don't see me as a person. And maybe that's something else she's frustrated with when it comes to her mom, and mom wanting her to behave in public and things like that. Okay, then in this argument, you're in Prim's head, and Prim wants to be a dick when she responds because it's Prim. Like she says it. She like wants to be an asshole about this. But then thinks to herself, she needed to move on, she being Prim, once and for all. And if she continued to hold a grudge, it would be like she was still clinging to those feelings. Since she had now given all her love to this person, meaning Bambi, why couldn't she grant forgiveness now? So basically, Prim is like, I want to keep fighting with you and prove that I'm right and hold on to my like negative feelings. But like, if I hold on to this negative feelings because I feel justified, you broke my heart, I'll never move on. Because that's what Prim was doing. Prim was holding on to the grudge. That's why she was trapped in the maze. So then she's like, okay, I need to forgive Bambi. That's the only way to move on, which is true. That is actually true. And it's good that we get this like thought process from Prim. And I think the series also tries to show it, but it feels kind of rushed because we don't get Prim's thoughts as much. Where at the very end, at the award show, when Bambi shows back up, Prim's just like, I forgive you, it doesn't even matter. Because I think that's how Prim had to move on. She had to forgive Bambi, and she didn't until the very end really forgive her. She held on to the grudge, and because she held on to the grudge and the anger, she never was able to move on. Okay, and then basically what they decide to do is like is Bambi's like, okay, I want to be friends with you, but I still want to have sex with you. So why don't we do a friends with benefit thing? And they agree to do that. And honestly, I thought this was a really interesting situation for Prim and Bambi because, yeah, this would be really interesting to have like exes come back and be like, we're not going to date. We're going to be friends and learn how to be friends because we never really learned how to do that. But also, let's go back into our old pattern of like having sex with each other. And like then that clearly doesn't work out. But this was interesting. And I thought, they're the ones that end up with the friends with benefit thing. Sasha and Gory don't have a friends with benefit thing in the novel. It's these two. Yeah, webcam. My webcam agrees. I thought this was really interesting, and I liked it. And what I like about it is that because they're labeling themselves as friends and not just like jumping back into their relationship, it gives that like jumping back into the relationship the way it was. Because in the series they do that. And then it's like the definition of insanity where you're doing the same thing again, hoping for a different result. It's destined to fail. Versus here, they're like, let's change this and be friends. Friends support each other. Friends talk about real shit. And they do that. And so then over time, they end up opening up because they're forming a friendship. And Bambi starts talking about her fears regarding her mother and how she feels really lost. So Prim can understand where she's coming from. And then she talks about what really happened with her ex, which I will get to, I promise. And then Prim opens up about to Bambi about how she toys with other women's hearts because she can't move on. And like they heal through these conversations. So I actually thought the friends with benefits scenario was actually really good with these two, and it played out really nicely, and it ended up healing a lot of things because they were able to forgive each other. They were able to get real finally, and like Bambi was able to break out of the mirror thing where she presents everything as beautiful even though it's like she's sad. She was able to like let her sadness out, let her fears out, all the things she never wanted Prim to see, and Prim saw it and didn't run away. And like, and you could argue that like perhaps when they were younger, this wouldn't have worked out because they were more immature, because they were just younger, less experienced. Perhaps it was the time in life that they have more life experience. It was because they were apart that they realized they had to like approach this differently. All of that can be true. It was just it's an interesting journey the way they presented it. I liked this. All right. Then we get to Prow and Min's relationship that I thought what was different about it. So I've mentioned it was a lot less about the sexuality crisis. It was more so about not Prim, more so about Min in the aftermath of Park. And it's not a bad thing. Like exploring her sexuality crisis, not a bad thing at all. This was more so about like really about Min's fear of starting a new relationship after the previous one was such a disaster. And what I thought was interesting about it when like reading this was that I felt like this was something also Prim was deeply afraid of. Because in Prim's head, anytime she thought about Bambi and her relationship with Bambi and like her feelings in the beginning of the novel, she kept referring to it as this deep chasm, like this really deep, dark place. And Min's relationship with Park and the aftermath of that felt very similar. And I like this because I think this is a more generally relatable plot line, meaning the fear of jumping into fear of starting in a relationship when the last one was a disaster. I think that's more relatable to a lot more people versus the sexuality crisis thing. Not that the sexuality crisis thing is not an important thing to talk about. It is, but I think that this made Min more empathetic to a broader audience. And it made it less about the gender stuff, less about the sexuality stuff, more about just like the relationship. And I think that like in the series, this was also there. It just wasn't as like the focus. And so I did like this, the way it was focused. And so really when you look at Min's relationship and Min trying to get into a new one, it was much more about like, why did she stay in this toxic relationship when she like knew it was toxic? And there's a lot more scenes in the novel about Park being explicitly abusive, both verbally, emotionally, physically, when it came to Min. And so when she talks this through with Prow, she asks this question. It's like coming from the compat stuff where she says, why wouldn't it be love that makes us able to endure? Meaning, like, love is endurance. Love is not fleeting. It's like lasting. And like, you need to be able to endure it and all that kind of stuff. And Prow's response is so great. She says, if it's real love, it should come with happiness too. Are you happy right now? And just, oh, it's so good. It's just the way that their conversations really highlight the poison of compet and that propaganda, which is that what Min was saying, which is that enduring love, like enduring the other person, is what love is, versus like finding your own happiness with the person, which is Prow's argument. And so Prow here by pointing out the happiness element. Oh, so later when Min tells Prow, basically, you opened up my world. If you really think about where Min starts and then where Prow comes in, it's actually really heartbreaking when you think about it, because basically what Min is saying is that like the kindness that Prow shows her and Prow's like concern for Min as a person, that was so novel and new to Min that it changed her world. Like, that is so sad when you really think about that. Like, that is that, like, your empathy changed my life. The fact that you asked me if I was happy changed my whole life. Like, that's depressing. Like, poor Min. And that is the poison of the compat propaganda. It really tells women, like, your happiness, your individuality does not matter. What matters is you enduring the other person. That's what love is. Enduring the abuse, enduring the gaslighting. Like, wow. Like, it was very, it was great. I like the way this went down with these two. In general, I really enjoyed Prow and Min's storyline in the novel. To me, their whole relationship felt a lot more organic in like the way it develops, their meetings, all of that. So I already talked about like the first time they meet in the bar when Prow saves her. But they have their second meeting is like this art gallery meet cute, which they do show in the series, but the sequence of event is different here, and I really, really enjoy it. So basically, Min just goes to the art gallery and she's just checking it out and is drawn to one of the photos in the gallery. And it's the photo from the series where it's the woman with the back scars. And Min is just drawn to the art. Okay. Nobody's there. It's just Min and the photo. And Min thinks to herself when she's like, why she's drawn to it. She thinks, quote, it was like a reflection of the wounds she herself had never acknowledged, that she too had pain like this. And Min thinks she had met many photographers, but it wasn't often she found one with whose work resonated with her so deeply. And I really like this version better because basically what's happening here is that Min is falling for Prow through the art. Okay? Because Min feels seen by Prow's work. Plus, after this, Min finds whoever's running this and is like, I want to buy that. And she buys the photograph before she knows who the artist is. So I really like that. That Min is like, oh, first of all, she's like, there's other people like me out there, people with these scars. And it's an unspoken way to acknowledge it through the photograph. And she acknowledges the fact that whoever captured this makes me feel seen. Like, I love that because they're both artists in their own way. And it's like artists connecting over art. It's like Love Design. That was what happened in Love Design. And I really love that so much. It's like they have their own language already. And then Prow shows up and she realizes who it is and is like, oh, it's you from the bar. And it's just, I love this meet cute. It's just, I like the sequence way better. And then they start talking and it becomes really evident that Min doesn't just feel seen by Prow's art, she's just as affected by Prow's words. And Min tells her the reason she loves it is that the photograph is, quote, it feels like your work comes from the heart, meaning I see you and I like what I see. And then Prow responds, quote, scars aren't meant to be shameful brands. They are symbols that we survived them, that we became stronger. And so in that moment, Min feels incredibly seen by what Prow is saying, not just the work. But it's like the work was from the heart, right? And Min responds to that. But then Min is also responding to Prow's logic, her thoughts, her empathy. And it's just, it feels more holistic, these two, and why they connect. And when the story keeps going, their connection is reciprocated because Prow also feels very seen by Min. So this is type of connection is mutual, and I love that about them. They end up having this conversation later in Prow's car. So Prow also has this like classic car, like so she's got enough money to have like this cool ass car. Again, more mature version of Prow, right? And they're having this talk about the next phase in Prow's career. And what happens is Min hires Prow to work on Bambi's thing, basically because Prim keeps fucking up and she needs a buffer. So she hires Prow. And I was like, we need another photographer in case you can't deal with Bambi. And Prow comes in drunk, like hungover for this photo shoot, and everybody notices it's not going well. And then Prow has to explain to Min, she's like, look, I'm a bartender. And something happened where like it was a work thing and they were like drink. And it's like a cultural customary thing when like clients are like drink, you drink. Because if you don't, it's not respectful. So Prow got caught up in a work thing where she couldn't refuse it and then was hungover the next day at the next job. And they're talking about it in the car because Prow's aware she messed up this job that Min gave her. And she's like, listen, I'm just going to quit. She's like, because this is your company. Like she says something like, this is your lifeblood, you and Prim. And she's like, and I'm not going to fuck that up for you. Because clearly I made a mistake and it was a big one. And I don't want to cost you more harm. So she's like, I'm going to take myself out of the equation. And Min tells her, okay, just like the art gallery where she's like, scars, not a bad thing. Proves you survived and you grow stronger for it. We're having a parallel conversation here where Min then tells Prow, quote, what I want to convey is that mistakes aren't as scary as not daring. Basically, she's like, you made a mistake, so what? You can be stronger and learn from this. Just the way scars are evidence that you survived and you were stronger for it. So she tells her that this goes both ways kind of thing. And then Prow really sweetly smiles and says, I like talking with you, Min. Talking with you always gives me new perspectives. And Min responds, same here. Talking with you often makes me dare to step out of my comfort zone. This time, I want to pull you out of your own. So I love this. Like their relationship with Red is a lot more reciprocal and that they were able to help each other, not just in like career wise, but like emotionally. And I really enjoyed it. And it just felt very natural the way it flowed and the sequence of events. So overall, they just felt like the B plot to me. They felt a lot more fleshed out and I enjoyed it. Another aspect I enjoy of Min and Prow is that Prow in the novel is the queen of consent. Okay, she is the queen. Okay. So again, because we're doing less of the we need to come out of the closet storyline, their sequence of events happens differently. So their first kiss happens spontaneously in the bar, in public. While like it's not like they're the only ones there. Everybody's there, and it's just like they're in their own little world. And to me, it almost parallels what happens with Oat and Mob Boss in Us, the series, which same actors and the same actors, where essentially like Prow chooses a drink for Min, okay? Because in Us, Oat creates a drink for Mob Boss and explains why. Same kind of thing happens here, where Prow explains, quote, she picked a dry martini and here's why. It's one of the strongest cocktails. Most people who order it have a self-confident character, are brave and decisive. So it's Prow describing Min and then manifesting it as a drink, which is really cute. So I love that parallel. It felt like a parallel to me, even though it's probably not. And then they start talking a little bit more deeply, and then this is when Min admits that she's scared of starting a new relationship. Because she's scared of being hurt again. And Prow is the only person she vocalizes this fear to. So she doesn't tell Prim, she tells Prow. And Prow responds, quote, if you didn't get hurt, if you weren't afraid, that would be strange. Meaning like your relationship blew up. If you weren't affected by it, and if you weren't scared of getting into a new one, like that would be weird. To be like very overconfident and being like, everything's gonna be great. Like, yeah, being scared after this big traumatic experience, that's normal. Like, that's okay. And Proud continues, everyone has a heart, but don't worry, those wounds can heal when we truly receive the kind of love we need. Which I think is also like a hallmark of this story, which is about like, quote, the good love. What is that? What is it really? How much? Like, I think that's exactly what Proud was saying. She's like, well, when you're in the right relationship, like you'll know, and you will live through this experience and perhaps the right kind of love will be the thing that helps heal it, not necessarily be this like impediment because you're scarred kind of thing. So I like the way Prow frames that. After Prow says all this, then they get real close. And then Prow asks, "Can I kiss you?" For the first kiss that happens in the bar. And then their second kiss, which happens when they're in the car, not the bar. Okay. And they're having this conversation, and then it almost leads to more than kissing in the car. But then Min like pulls back, and Prow very quickly apologizes and like, "Oh shit, I shouldn't have done that." But then Min's just like, "Listen, someone's gonna see us in this car. Let's go inside." And when they're inside, Prow communicates a ton and is like, "Can I continue?" Like when they end up in their first time. So like there's a lot of like consent stuff happening with Prow and Min coming from Prow mostly, which is really awesome because again, their relationship it's more of like a supportive thing, and I think it comes out in these like intimate moments, like their which again they were in public the first kiss, and like Min says yes. So I think all of that was really important, and I kind of wish more of that was in the show, but I like that that's in here. I think it fits Prow's character, number one, who's empathetic, and their relationship as it evolves, which I really enjoyed. Okay. Also, I mentioned briefly earlier, the other thing I like about their plot line is Min's rationale for hiring Prow. It wasn't to like keep Prow around or to make Prow famous or like any of that stuff. The reason she hires Prow is because Prim's a hot mess, and she gets into this public argument with Bambi in the middle of like a work shoot. And so Min's like, "Listen, clearly you can't handle Bambi." She says you can't handle Bambiness. That's what Min says, which is hilarious. And I love that. And they keep using that term. It's really funny in this conversation. And she's like, "I know you can't handle her because look at you. So why don't we hire another photographer who can be the buffer?" Okay. Well, actually, no, that's not what she says. She says she wants to remove Prim from the project so that to spare her from dealing with Bambi. And Prim comes back and says no, because to do that would be, quote, running away from the problem. And it's like, okay, Prim, you've never faced a problem head on in your life, but you're willing to start now. It's because Prim wants to be around Baby. But she says that, which is admirable on the surface. So Min's like, "Okay, I respect that. So how about we hire a second photographer to be the buffer? So when Bambi gets too much, you send the other photographer in to like work more with Bambi." And that's how Prow gets involved. And I kind of like that. It's more, again, highlighting more about Min and Prim's friendship versus separating Min and Prow into their own little isolated plot line. It like brought all of that more cohesively. So I did like this avenue. All right. That's all this. There's a lot. I was very surprised how much I was going to have to say about Min and Prow because I really enjoyed the way they were written in the story. Something that I was less happy about, but I get it, was Sasha and Goria, because to me they read like the C plot. Like Prim and Bambi are like the focus. Then there's like Min and Prow are more like the B plot. There was a lot going on because again, Min and Prim were a lot more connected through their friendship and that kind of stuff. And then Sasha and Goria almost read like their own thing because Sasha was less, not Sasha, Sasha's less connected, period. She like is work buddies with Bambi. Their friendship is not fleshed out. And then Goria is like involved because she's working with them, but then like has this thing going on with Prim that's not working out. So they're less cohesive. So it made sense for this actually to be the plot line that was more on the outs and more like independent of everything else because Sasha and Goria were not really connected to anybody. But like Min and Prim were way more connected. And I really think in the series that really boiled down to who was cast as who and like fan service shit. And so they had to rewrite it because who was cast as who. I think that's what happened. And I'm not mad at it. I'm kind of mad because Min and Prim's friendship should have been more fleshed out. But I think that really came down to who was cast as who and how they had to write people. That's just my opinion. I don't have confirmation of that, but it would make sense. But because of that, you get different stories, and that's not a bad thing. Okay, something else that was actually very different also in the novel is that in the plot line of Sasha and Goria reads as the main character and Sasha's the side character. Versus the series, Sasha's the main character, Goria's the side character. And again, I think that's who is cast as who kind of thing. And they framed the characters because Milk's the bigger actor and she's the main character, and then Love is not. And so they rewrote the characters and what they had going on based on casting, I think. Because in the novel, Sasha has the least depth of all the characters and no backstory whatsoever. But her character traits are there. Like the building blocks of Sasha you see in the series are there. And that's true of every single character in this story. So Sasha in the novel is really, really good at reading people. And she's the one that calls out Prim's behavior before Goria recognizes it. She's like, I just met this woman and I can tell what she's doing. Goria and Sasha, what I like about them is a lot like a lot like Min and Prow. They both have personality traits in common that makes their relationship cohesive and make total sense. So it's a lot more clear in the novel that they both enjoy challenges and neither of them back down easily, which again makes their dynamic so much fun because you have two very strong-willed people who are both trying to win against each other. So what could possibly go wrong? And they both connect on the fact that they're both very deeply lonely. And I went over the scene where that came down, where they're talking in the car and Goria reveals her past. And Sasha follows up that conversation by saying, when we hug, I can tell you know how to make someone feel warm. And Sasha says, it's because you need the same thing yourself, don't you? And it's like what a powerful thing to say and what a powerful thing to pick up on by Goria's like body language. And so yeah, Sasha's like super perceptive, and it's one of those like recognizes like situations where I think Sasha feels that too. Like she makes other people feel warm by like hooking up with them or whatever, but like it's never reciprocated fully back to her. And so that's what they get from each other. Like, I can make you feel loved, you make me feel loved back. And the other thing about Sasha and Goria that never changes, no matter the story, is that these two, no matter their status, no matter if they're like coworkers, frenemies, hookup buddy, whatever you want to call them, no matter what, Sasha and Goria always have each other's back. Like, always. And one of my favorite scenes in the novel is the situation where Goria is trying to get the dress loan. Okay, and she goes in the shop, and basically they're like, oh, we changed our policy. We're not going to give this out to designers anymore because you guys keep trashing our stuff. So no more of this. We just changed the policy yesterday. And Goria's like, I called a week ago. I need this for tomorrow. You can't just, like, please just do this for me like you promised. And the employee's like, sorry, this changed yesterday. And Goria's trying to figure out what the hell to do when Sasha walks into the shop. And she's there to see the designer or whatever. She's there for nothing that has anything to do with Goria. And then they talk, and Sasha realizes what's happening, and then she talks to the employee and is like, hey, this designer needs it for me. This is my friend who does a great job. Can I have the dress? And promise you she'll give it back in the right condition. And the employee says, okay, Sasha, if it's for you, she can have the dress. And so I love that. They've only had like bickering, bantering conversations up to this point, and like Sasha sees she needs help and then steps in and helps her. And then Goria also accepts the help and is like, oh, I didn't realize there was an advantage to like this like high profile model being my friend. And so I love that. They have each other's back no matter what. No matter what's going on. And I love that about them. So in general, with Girl Rules, the novel, what's different, and like this I think is a personal preference thing, whether you would like this or not, is that overall in the story, there's a lot more jealousy happening between all the people kind of stuff going on. And I think that there's some of this happening in the series, but way less. And it could be just that there's more time. But anyway, so like a summary of that is basically when they're all working together at doing a photo shoot, and like I think this is when Prowl was drunk, and so Prim takes over, as the photographer. And she's doing something where she's like standing on a chair to like get some angle. She's like basically like so focused on what she's doing. She doesn't take her own safety into account, which is very prim. If that's not a metaphor for prim, I don't know what is. And so basically she's falling off of this chair and like everybody sees it. Gory is the one that like steps in to like save her from fall. Because like Sasha's modeling, Bambi's doing whatever. And like Gory I think is closest and like comes in and like literally catches Prim before she kills herself, falling off this chair. And here's a summary based on the dialogue, the inner monologues of what's happening. So this happens. And then they're like doing the thing where they're frozen because she catches her. Quote the novel. Sasha watched this scene with displeasure. Seeing Goria's caring attitude and Prim's graceful gaze made the model even more irritated. Behind the monitor, Bambi gritted her teeth, watching the scene between Prim and Goria on screen. A thin, displeased smile crossed her lips. So I think that like easily we could have had scenes where they're all there and it's way more jealous based. Okay. One scene that's very jealousy driven, I would have loved that we were robbed of, okay, is when they're in the bar, and this is not the first time Bambi shows up. This is like another time they're at the gay bar where Prim is flirting again with Goria. And then in the middle of flirting with Goria, she ends up ditching Goria for this model named Christy. Okay, this woman that Prim has flirted with before shows up and is like, hey, remember me? And then she's like, buy me a drink, Prim. And Prim, who's self-aware allegedly, is about to refuse. And then, to quote the book, but she turned and saw the gaze of someone else watching, Bambi, and from the team's table, and changes her mind and says, all right then, let me buy you a drink too. So she starts flirting with this woman to get back at Bambi after she was flirting with Goria, ditches Goria, the model shows up, and then she's like, I'm not going to do this. And then like, to spite Bambi, she starts toying with the model. And this is something I think was very apparent in the series, that Prim baits Bambi, okay? And here she is, literally explicitly baiting Bambi, because Bambi's watching, and she's like, okay, I'll flirt with this woman, because Bambi's watching. Okay. So again, like you can read Prim as sympathetic because of her thoughts, but then she does shit like this, and you're like, it's the same Prim from the series. This is the same Prim. Okay. Then it keeps going, and then Prim ends up kissing the model. Okay, Bambi sees this. Bambi ends up like hurting herself at the bar. She gets like really drunk and then like runs into a door or some shit because like the lights go out. And Bambi starts screaming because she hurts herself. She's like bleeding. She like hurts herself. Prim hears Bambi, knows it's Bambi. I was about to kiss the model again when she hears this, then ditches the model, goes and gets Bambi. Then at some point is going to leave with Bambi, and then the model that is like, okay, Prim, takes her drink and throws it in Prim's face. And it's like, yes, where was this scene? Where was more people calling out Prim for her fucking shitty ass behavior? Like, this scene was crazy. The way she like literally toys with two different women because of Bambi, ditches them because of Bambi, and then one of them's like, fuck you, and throws a drink at Prim. Fucking love that. Then it doesn't stop there though. It's not just Bambi centric. At some point, she gets into an argument with Bambi where Bambi gets jealous over Goria. And to stop Bambi from being jealous over Goria, Prim literally says, Goria doesn't like girls like that. Like, what? Like, Prim tries to convince Bambi that Gory is straight. Like, she literally says that. Like, so to sit there and say Prim in the novel is not a bad Prim is awful. Like, Prim gaslights Bambi. She literally leads on so many people. Like, she's terrible. Like, that's just who Prim is. She even gaslights Bambi, which she does in the series. So it's the same Prim, guys. But if you're reading in the beginning and you're in her thoughts, you're like, oh man, Prim's not so bad. But then she does all these things and you're like, and I'm like, no, this is the same Prim they wrote in the show. It's the same Prim. It's just, you don't hear her thoughts as much. So you don't realize that she's self-aware of many of the things she's doing, which in my opinion makes it worse. She knows what she's doing, and she does it anyway. Anyway, that's my prim rant. I was just like, huh, maybe she's not so bad. And then like just kept reading and I was like, no, she's just as bad. She's just as bad. But she is more empathetic overall, I think, based on like how things get resolved, but still. It's just like, again, Prim's a good person and a shitty person, like all wrapped into one person. It's just she's a human. All right. So jumping gears to Gory and Sasha. So their kind of hooking up situation, it's not a friends with benefit thing. At least they never explicitly call it that. What ends up happening, their relationship also felt a little bit more organic in the way it went down, but there's less dialogue and less scenes overall with them. So like you can argue it's not, you can argue it feels rushed because there's less of it, and that's valid. So what ends up happening with them is like, okay, to piggyback off of that scene. So Prim ditches Gory and Christy, leaves with Bambi. So Gory thinks to herself, okay, I have two choices here. Either I go home and cry because I've been bamboozled again by Prim, or I walk into the bar and have fun as if nothing happened, like play it off cool, because Gory does that a lot. And just as she's about to turn back, she found a third option, which was Sasha. So Gory is like, I'll pick door number 3, and then marches up to Sasha and kisses her, just like the show. But then we get Gory's inner monologue, which is very revealing and interesting and helpful. Okay, so she kisses Sasha and then thinks to herself, the soft lips were more thrilling than imagined. In just a few seconds, their lips touched. She felt heat spreading all over her body. Gory broke the kiss first, startled that it was better than she thought. So yeah, she goes to hook up with Sasha out of spite, kind of thing, well, because she's hurting, and then is like, holy shit, this was way better than I thought. Like, oh, okay, I'm actually kind of into her, which I think is really great. And it keeps going, like just based on Gory's thoughts. So then they end up at Sasha's place, because they end up making out for a bit, and then she's like, I don't even need to say where this is headed. I think we both know. And then she's like, your place or mine, basically. And then they end up at Sasha's. And the way Gory thinks about Sasha's apartment the first time she's there is super revealing of Gory's headspace. Because, again, it's framed as like, she's hurt, this is to spite Prim. But her inner monologue tells a different story. So she describes Sasha's apartment as like really romantic, and like describes it in these like passionate, dreamlike descriptors. So to me, like reading that, it almost felt like Gory was like living out this like fantasy when she like shows up to Sasha's and like enjoying it. There's a lot of it that shows like Gory enjoys this evening a lot. And the thing I appreciate about this story, and just in general with Girl Rules, is that it doesn't shy away from women's sexual desires and pleasure. Instead, it treats it as normal, which it should be, but not all cultures think that way when it comes to women. So I appreciate that this just normalizes that. And like just even here, they're not even having sex. It's just Gory is describing where she's going and how it's like setting up the scene for like this night is not just this like I need comfort thing. It's more than that. It's like magical in a way. It's like something Gory never imagined possible. And like here it is manifesting. Hence the like startled that it was better than I thought kind of thing. Okay, so overall, their very first hookup is very evident that it's more than that. So yeah, on the surface, it's Gory is seeking comfort when Prim breaks her heart. And she comes back again, okay? Because like they have their first hookup and it goes really well. And then Gory comes back. Sorry, I forgot this was a different scene. She comes back another time when Prim breaks her heart again. Because like Prim toys with her for 50% of the book, okay? She comes back to Sasha and she's clearly upset, okay? And without saying anything, she tries to like initiate sex with Sasha, and Sasha, who's good at reading people, can tell Gory is really upset, and she slows it down. She's like, wait. She says, not like this, meaning we're not gonna have sex like this. Like if you want to have sex, because the first time there's like, it's clear that like from Gory's point of view, she's like, Sasha seems to be kissing me like she's been pining for me, and like there's longing here. Like it's not just this like emotionless thing. Like it was very clear in their first hookup that there was feelings coming from both of them. And it's evident here when Gloria shows up, she's like, I need this to take my mind off this. And Sasha's like, we're not doing that. Like, you're upset. You need to tell me why. And so she engages Gloria into like, why are you upset? And then Gloria, who's feeling insecure because Prim just ditched her for like the millionth time, starts projecting Prim's bullshit onto Sasha, which definitely happens in the show. And so basically trying to insinuate that like Sasha's using her, Sasha's going to ditch her. This is not, she doesn't feel anything. She's toying with her because that's what Prim is doing. And basically Gloria is like Gloria is healing from that. Like, she's actively heartbroken from the situation with Prim, and this new thing comes along. So like she has multiple feelings conflicting with each other, which is valid because of the timing. Like, Gloria's a human being, like, makes perfect sense, right? So then she starts like, again, projecting that onto Sasha, and is because she's afraid that it's going to happen again, which is what's going on with Min, right? She's like, I'm afraid that my next relationship is going to be tainted by the first one, and my fears. And without saying all that explicitly, like, Glory's just emotionally saying all that through her emotional language. So then Sasha has to like very explicitly tell her, quote, I might want a one-night stand with others, but I've never given false hope or played with people's feelings, especially with you. And Gloria asks, are you saying that what you feel for me is a real feelings? And Sasha says, yes. And if I say it's real, would you be with me? And then she's like, do you want to just date me for real? Like, and then Gloria, in her brain, Gloria didn't care about anything else anymore. At this moment, she needed to be with the person who only wanted her. And then they go have sex, but Gloria never really answers that question. And what ends up happening basically is like, they come back to the girlfriend thing again, and Gloria's like, I need to get over Prim and deal with these feelings basically that I'm having. And then I'll get back to you in like a couple days. Okay. But before we can get to that, Bambi puts Prim's entire crew in danger, okay? And this is something that happens multiple times during during the novel, where Bambi, yes, she's involved with the breakfast in bed situation, and she's very involved in like producer meetings and all this kind of stuff. But Bambi is like singularly focused on getting back at her mother and making this successful so her mom can't control her and all that kind of stuff. And so she's really, really focused on like the outcome and what this is going to look like versus like how we're going to do it. Okay. Which, again, to be fair, she has no idea how this works because she's not a producer. She's the money and she just wants a certain image. She's like, I need the image. And so she has a lot of say on like things like where they're going to shoot these things to get the visuals that they need. And this happens multiple times. And this happens early on, and she's like, I need it to be here. And then it's this very impractical location where Prim's crew is getting pissed off because it's tiny and it's not practical for shooting. And so they're all on top of each other and it's a mess. And then Prim, I think, takes them out for drinks to like calm them down later. And then it happens again, okay, where they're getting towards the end of this campaign. And basically Bambi's like, it needs to be at this rustic looking warehouse, okay? And the warehouse is literally falling apart, okay? Like it's a safety hazard, like a documented legal safety hazard. And Bambi insists that they film here, okay? And so Min's like, okay, I'll do my best to like get the electrical taken care of, get this, the security of the structure before we film. And it ends up not happening because like Bambi rushes it and like, it needs to be done, just we'll deal with it. As they're setting up, an electrical fire starts as they start plugging shit in, okay? And then the building catches fire and starts literally collapsing when they're in it because Bambi insisted they had to film here, even though they brought up all the safety concerns. And she was like, fuck that. Fix it before we film. Never gets fixed. They try to do it anyway. Literally catches on fire and almost kills Gloria. Okay. Spoiler. So then it's Prim, Gloria, and Bambi are like deep inside this building, and Prim leads them out. And then a smoldering beam falls on Gloria's arm, ends up giving her burns and breaks her arm. So of course, Gloria is the one literally injured by Bambi's bullshit. And then Prim gets them out of the building, okay? And Gloria, who's actually injured, okay, gets in one ambulance. Bambi gets in another. Bambi, who like just breathes in smoke but is fine otherwise. Then we have this dramatic moment where Prim has to choose, which ambulance do I get into? My friend who's literally injured, and then Gloria's like screaming, like, help me. And then Prim's like, nah, and gets in with Bambi. And so poor Gloria, like, it was like the final nail in the coffin. She's like, wow, you can't even care for me as a friend when I'm visibly injured and Bambi isn't. And then the door closes to the ambulance, leaving Gloria all alone. And it opens again, and Sasha jumps in because she showed up late because she's not the crew. She shows up later for the shoot and saw this fire and then found Gloria, gets in the ambulance, and does not leave Gloria's side. Like, not except to go shower later. That's it. So when we start the scene up again, it's Gloria waking up in the hospital and realizing her injuries are worse than she thought. She broke her arm. She's like arms in a cast. And Sasha's there. And again, she's insecure because Prim just fucked her over again. Prim just fucked her over again. And fucking Prim. And so she's like questioning Sasha on her intentions because she's like, I keep getting hurt by Prim. And then she's like, so why did you stay? Like, why did you stay with me? And Sasha's response is really sweet, where she says she was, quote, afraid you'd wake up in pain, feeling lonely with no one around. Which to me sounds like projection from Sasha. She's like, if I was in your shoes, I would also be afraid to wake up in pain all alone with no one. So, and she keeps going, and she's basically like, what if you never woke up? She almost like goes on that tangent and then like stops herself because like it's very clear that Sasha was like very worried something bad was going to happen to Gloria, and she's like she didn't want to not be there basically. And she's like, I only went home to shower and change, and I came right back, and I haven't left. And it's really sweet. And like that's when Gloria makes her choice to like believe Sasha and be like, wow, this is a love worth fighting for, because like it's real and you believe in me. And like I didn't tell you to do any of this, and you just did it because you were genuinely worried about me. And so that's when she basically agrees to date Sasha and says, like, quote, then can you promise to take good care of me? And I'll promise I'll try to love you too. So it's really cute that they're like, I'll take care of you, you take care of me. And that's like how they get together, which is actually really cute. And again, they follow kind of like, again, more of a romance kind of story. Or it develops and they get together at the very end, and it's on like mutual footing. But it's because Bambi almost kills everybody at Prim's company. So fucked. Okay. All right. So then Prim goes with Bambi, obviously, and stays with Bambi. And Bambi just had like smoke inhalation. And at some point, these two get into why Bambi left Prim. Okay. And it all stems back to Bambi's first girlfriend. So this is another thing that's different. Bambi's fucked up first relationship fucked her up so badly. Then when she tried to date Prim, it was a hot mess. So I kind of like this too, that Bambi and Prim were not each other's first loves in this situation. Bambi had another girlfriend. It went horribly. And then she was scarred, and that affected her relationship with Prim. I actually like this way better because it kind of shows you what could have happened had Min had a different headspace, right? Because Min was worried about this. She's like, my first relationship was a disaster. I'm worried I'm scared of the next one. But she had Prow, who was able to talk her through it and be like, just because things went badly, doesn't mean this will, or like, doesn't mean it's not going to be easy, but like, you'll be stronger and like, you'll have me. And like, it went way differently. Bambi was so fucked up from her first relationship, she was scared and left Prim, basically. So what happened was, basically, Bambi's ex-girlfriend commits suicide while they're together. And it's not just that she commits suicide, it's how it goes down. It's so fucked up, okay? So, to quote the novel, basically, this girl, the girlfriend, calls Bambi and is on the phone with Bambi. And like, when you get the memory, Bambi's like running through Bangkok or wherever the hell she is, trying to find her. Like, she's running, trying to get to her. And this girl's on the phone, like actively suicidal, on the phone. And telling Bambi it's all her fault, basically. And she says, quote, you made me love you, become obsessed with you. Only you could make me feel like this. I can't help it. If one day you have to laugh with other friends. You don't belong to me alone. Which is insane. Like, this is insane, possessive red flag behavior where it's basically like, if you have other people in your life, then that means you don't love me. And I can't live like this. That's the ex is saying. And so Bambi's running on the phone and says, what do you want me to do? Tell me I can do anything for you. On the other end of the phone, she hears laughter. And Bambi ran even faster. And the last thing the ex says is, can you kill everyone else except me? Like, basically, I can't exist in a world where you have other people in your life. If you could get rid of all of them, then we'll be happy. And then literally Bambi shows up to where she is, and she's like on this ledge over this river. And then Bambi watches her jump and never resurface. And like, so like Bambi watches the suicide and is like trying to get there to stop it, and then like doesn't. So it's like supremely traumatizing. What happens to Bambi? And what she got out of this was like, if we're really in love and we become codependent, this could happen. And she's really worried about that. And Bambi never told Prim about any of this until now. And she tells Prim when they're talking about it, quote, I'm not afraid to love someone because I don't want to love, but because I'm afraid of hurting them, afraid of losing them again. And Prim's like, why didn't you tell me before this? And Bambi says, you are the last person I would have wanted to know. And Prim says, why? And Bambi says, because I loved you. Loved you so much, I didn't want you to go anywhere. Loved you so much, I was afraid my love would hurt you. Like it hurt my first girlfriend. This is my fault. I didn't want you to think badly of me. I didn't want to lose you like I lost her. Like, that was the moral of the story that Bambi got. Because Bambi was young when that happened. And I understand where Bambi's coming from, where she's like, why would I tell you this deep, dark truth where I was responsible for somebody else's death? I was afraid, of what would happen when you knew that. And like, but also she's like, even without that knowledge, I left you because I was afraid we would end up like this. And I don't want you to die, like, basically, like, which is insane, all of this. But like, I understand why Bambi would think that, having gone through what she went through. And I like the resolution of this because Prim, at the end of the conversation, suggests that they repair their relationship by actually communicating, basically. And Prim hears this and then says, you don't have to endure that terrible memory anymore. From now on, I will love you myself. I will love you in the way that is most correct love, because the wrong kind of love has hurt the two of us enough. I'm sorry for everything. Bambi responds, and then Prim says, don't be. Thank you instead. Thank you for everything that made me meet you. Like, basically, Prim is saying, my life is better with you than without you. And when we are not truthful with each other, it ends up being poisonous love, essentially. And like, this love you had in the past, like, you could call it love, but it wasn't. Like, that was really bad. That wasn't, quote, good love. And it really hurt her deeply. And then it ended up affecting all of Bambi's relationships afterwards. Like, she wasn't close to anybody, like friends, like nothing. And so Prim's like, instead of keeping yourself closed off and like just torturing yourself with this memory, like, let's go through life together and like talk to each other. And I think that made a lot of sense. And I like that for their relationship. But like, damn, was that fucked up. Damn, was that fucked up. Oh my God. All right, something else that's different about the novel that I anticipate made a lot of people pissed off in the series was that there are explicit sex scenes in the novel. And I think that that's fine to not have in a show. It's cool if you have it, it's cool if you don't. It's up to the team putting this together, the actors' comfortability, all that kind of stuff. So like, I'm not upset about this, but I will say that in the novel, each one of the scenes, I think, very accurately capture the relationships really well and like the tone of what was happening kind of thing. So Min and Prowl's first time is what's explicit. It's tons of communication and checking in with each other. And it's very much about learning what the other person likes and doesn't like. And it reads as very like tender and loving and sweet, which is their relationship in a nutshell. Comparing that with Sasha and Goria, we get their hookup scene, the first hookup. It is very explosive. It's passion driven. There's pining. There's longing in it. It's very explicit that like Goria loses control, and Goria is somebody who's always in control, and like Sasha gets off on making that happen, which makes sense for the two of them. And something else that was really interesting during their hookup scene is that Goria notes that like Sasha doesn't give her any time to think. Like once like the consent is there, like Goria's like she doesn't have time to think about anything. It's just Sasha just keeps going kind of thing. And I kind of read that as like a desperation thing on Sasha's end. Because yes, there's horniness. Yes, 100%. But also it's like Sasha is scared Goria is going to leave or change her mind. So she's really quick to do whatever to get Goria to like willingly stay with her. Which is like, it's also that hunger, it's that passion, it's like very fast, that kind of thing. And then Bambi and Prim. Basically the summary of their sex scene is they're trying to out-top each other for who gets to be in control. Which totally makes sense. Okay, so that is Girl Rules the novel in a nutshell. And I think the moral of the story here is that good love, which is what the novel was intending to explore, it's about what you need, not necessarily what you want, okay? Each character in this story finds what they need from their partner, not necessarily what they want, okay? So Min and Prowl find honest connection, support, communication, understanding, and gently being pushed out of their comfort zone. Basically facing their fears, which not everybody wants to face their fears, but the other partner gently pushes them in that direction and supports them while they do something uncomfortable, like stepping out of their comfort zone, okay? Not necessarily you want to do that, but they need to do that in order to grow, okay? Corey and Sasha in their relationship find passion, unspoken support, someone that can see through them and anticipate their needs, okay? Being seen on that vulnerable level. Not their characters, they feel uncomfortable with that sometimes, which again, not what you want, but they need it, okay? Prim and Bambi find someone that sees through their lies, both of them, okay? Sees through the lies they convince themselves are truths and pushes them, often against their will, to deal with reality. And I think that is the good love in these situations, okay? It's about what the characters need, not necessarily what they want. Nobody wants to be pushed against. Nobody wants to face reality when it's scary. Nobody wants to be uncomfortable. But the other partner gives them what they need through adversity. And I think that is really the moral of this story and why I found Girls to be such an interesting story about relationship dynamics, especially people who've been in relationships, who've been harmed by them, who are actively grieving, and how those kinds of experiences, the scars don't end things, but they do present challenges, and strong people move past that or live through it and make mistakes and keep going. And that is why I love Girls and why I think it's a really great foundation for a story. I will say, though, when objectively looking at the novel, to me, the ending of the novel felt way more rushed than the ending of the series, okay? However, I will say that. I think it was more rushed. It's 140-something pages. It's real short. I will say, though, that the ending, in that context to me, and both endings of just the way the story ends in general, it feels more like this slice of life moment with an open-ended. It just like ends at a point, but like, the story doesn't actually end. They're like, life's going to keep going after this. So like the ending is not written. It's just like, this is the point where we're stopping the story and these characters keep going. right? It's not, and we live happily ever after. It's more like, and we decided to try this out. And then it ends before they actually try it. So we don't actually know. Does it work out? Does it not work out? We don't know. We just know where they decided to be in their relationship and what they're going to try to do. And then it just ends. So ultimately, the novel ends with the launch of Bambi's fashion line, Breakfast in Bed, and it wraps up at the party for the launch. And to me, the plots feel unfinished because I think that's the point. I think it's just, it ends where it ends. It's not necessarily we're wrapping everything up in a neat little bow. It's just we're coming to a conclusion. This is where the story is ending. This is where the characters are at when it ends, and the rest is unwritten kind of thing. So Min and Prow, if you thought they were rushed in the series, they're very rushed here. So basically it ends with the disaster dinner at Min's parents' house. Okay, they catch them kissing, turn on Prow, and then Prow walks out of there, and Min goes with her and basically is like, we didn't do anything wrong, and then leaves with Prow. So does she leave her family forever? We don't know. Like, what happened there? Like, if they just walk out on dinner, no idea. So when the series where it ends, when there's like kind of a conclusion to be like, everything's probably going to be fine, that felt more like, okay, we had an ending, versus here they just leave and like, what does that mean? Does that mean we're done with the family? We're never going back? Like, will they repair it later? We're going to try again? Like, nothing. That's just it. Sasha and Gloria agrees to date Sasha, and then after Sasha explains why she stayed in the hospital, that's kind of it. That was just it. They just agree to date. Nothing else happens. Prim and Bambi finally talk about the past. And then they're like, we need to talk about real stuff. And then they decide to date each other again. That's it. That's it. That's kind of where it ends. Like, so to me, I think the novel felt more like we're just coming to an end point. And then the story just kind of continues after this. And it's just like, this is where we stop following them, which I think is totally fine. But just be prepared for that. It's pretty rushed, in my opinion. All right. So that's the end of Girl Rules. Honestly, I really loved it. I thought it was a really good novel. I think that it had a good foundation for what they were trying to do. And I think it did accomplish what they were trying to accomplish in terms of exploring what is good love and what isn't it, and how relationships affect people. And I just really like that type of story. There's definitely critiques to it. There's definitely good things, bad things. But overall, it's an easy read. I really enjoyed it. And I like that this was an original story that had a focus for what it was trying to do rather than a romance it was trying to tell. Like, personally, I thought that was very refreshing and honestly a good attempt at that. I enjoyed it. So that's it for book club. Next time, I'm not sure what the next book club is going to be. We'll see. It might be Enemies with Benefits. It might be Queendom. I was going to do The Heir, but it looks like Kaitlyn's going to be able to join me for The Heir. So we're probably going to be able to do that one together. So I'm going to push that one a little bit back. But if you have any suggestions for any other novels that you'd like me to do or you would like us to cover on the podcast, please leave them in the comments. We are more than happy to do so. And let me know your thoughts and feelings about Girl Rules, especially if you've read the novel, especially if you know a better place to get a copy of the English translation. Also, let me know. And thank you for coming on this journey. Until next time, hydrate for lesbian Jesus and gay it up all over the place. Bye! And with that, we've been Big Gay Energy. If you like this episode, check out all our other episodes right here on YouTube.
Please like, leave a comment below, and subscribe for more amazing super gay content.